The blizzard had already taken everything from her. Now it was about to bring something back. When widow Lydia Hartwell's children dragged a bleeding stranger through her cabin door that December night, she had no idea the dying cowboy clutched secrets worth killing for. What started as an act of mercy would ignite a war that would burn her fields, threaten her children, and force her to choose between safety and love. Stay with me until the end, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The Montana winter of 1875 came early and stayed cruel. Lydia Hartwell stood at her cabin window, watching snow devils dance across the frozen wasteland that used to be her husband's pride. 20 acres of homestead land that had promised them a future. Now it promised only survival, and barely that. The glass was so cold her breath froze in delicate fern patterns across its surface, beautiful and deadly, like everything else in this God-forsaken territory. Behind her, the fire in the stone hearth crackled weakly, fed by the last of the split wood she'd chopped that morning. Her hands still ached from swinging the axe, blisters upon blisters that never quite healed before she had to swing it again. Those were gentlemen's hands once, soft and clean, belonging to a schoolteacher in Philadelphia who'd never imagined she'd end up here. Alone, desperate, and so tired the exhaustion had settled into her bones like a second skeleton. "Mama, I'm cold." Grace's voice was small, paper-thin with hunger and chill. The girl was 9 years old but looked younger, her cheeks hollow in the firelight, her dark hair hanging limp around her face. She sat wrapped in every blanket they owned, which amounted to 3 threadbare quilts and her father's winter coat, still smelling faintly of tobacco and mountain sage even after 2 years. 2 years since Thomas Hartwell had ridden out to check the trap lines and never came back. They'd found him 3 days later, frozen solid beneath a fallen pine, his horse long gone and his rifle missing. The land office said the homestead claim was still valid as long as Lydia could prove continuous habitation and improvement. What they didn't say was how a widow with 2 young children and $17 to her name was supposed to improve anything. "I know, sweetheart." Lydia left the window and knelt beside her daughter, tucking the quilts tighter. "Just a little while longer. The fire will warm up soon." It was a lie. The fire would die in a few hours, and she'd have to choose between burning the last of the firewood now or saving it for morning. Either way, someone would be cold. Someone was always cold. "Is Jonah back yet?" Grace asked. As if summoned by his name, the door burst open in a blast of wind and snow. Jonah stumbled inside, 12 years old and already too much the man of the house, his shoulders set in that stubborn line that reminded Lydia so sharply of Thomas it hurt. Snow caked his too thin jacket and crusted in his dark hair. "Shut the door!" Lydia rushed forward, throwing her weight against the wind. Together they wrestled it closed, the leather hinges protesting with a groan that echoed through the one-room cabin. "Anything?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. She could see it in the slump of his shoulders, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes. Traps were empty. All of them. Jonah's voice cracked on the last word, hovering between boy and man. "I'm sorry, Mama. I checked every line, even the far ones by the creek. Nothing. Nothing." The word hung in the cold air like a verdict. Lydia touched his frozen cheek, felt the cold radiating from his skin. "It's not your fault. Animals are smart. They hole up in weather like this. We gotta eat." The words came out flat, factual. "Grace needs to eat." "I'm not that hungry," Grace lied from her nest of blankets. Her stomach growled loud enough to contradict her. Lydia moved to the small table where their remaining supplies sat in grim inventory. Half a sack of cornmeal, maybe 2 pounds, a small tin of lard, 6 withered potatoes, a handful of dried beans, 3 strips of venison jerky so tough you could sole a boot with it. That was it. That was everything standing between her children and starvation. She could make it stretch maybe a week if she was careful. If she ate almost nothing herself. If no one got sick. If the weather broke and Jonah could check the traps again. If, the currency of desperate people. "I'll make cornmeal mush," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "With a little lard, it'll stick to your ribs." Neither child complained, though she'd seen the way their faces fell. They'd been eating cornmeal mush for 6 days straight. Before that, it had been watery bean soup. The last time they'd had meat was nearly 2 weeks ago, a scrawny rabbit Jonah had snared, which Lydia had stretched into 3 meals by adding every potato and onion they had. While the mush cooked, Lydia let her mind drift to dangerous places. The town of Redemption was 14 miles south, a full day's walk in good weather, impossible in this. Even if she could get there, what then? The general store extended credit only to those who could pay it back, and everyone knew the Hartwells had nothing. The church had helped at first, but charity had its limits, and those limits had been reached 6 months ago. There was always the option of giving up the claim, moving into town, finding work as a washerwoman or cook, but that meant admitting defeat. That meant telling her children that their father had died for nothing, that his dream of building something, of leaving them something, had been just another beautiful lie the frontier told to desperate people. "Mama!" She looked up from the pot to find Jonah watching her with eyes too old for his face. "We're going to be okay," he said. "Tomorrow I'll go further out. There's got to be game somewhere." The fierce protectiveness in his voice broke something in her chest. He was a child. He should be worrying about child things, games and lessons, and growing up slowly. Instead, he was taking inventory of trap lines and calculating calorie counts and trying to be the man his father never got the chance to become. "I know," she whispered. "We're Hartwells. We're survivors." She ladled the mush into their 3 tin bowls, giving the children larger portions and taking barely a cup for herself. They ate in silence, the only sound the howl of wind through the gaps in the wall and the pop of the dying fire. Outside, the storm intensified. Snow came in horizontal sheets now, driven by wind that shrieked like a living thing. Lydia had seen storms like this before, the kind that buried homesteads and killed livestock and made the whole world disappear under a white shroud, the kind that made people do desperate things. "Tell us a story, Mama." Grace had finished her mush and was licking the bowl clean, getting every last bit. "Please?" Lydia almost said no. She was exhausted, hungry, cold to the core, but Grace's eyes were so hopeful, so young, despite everything, that she couldn't refuse. "What kind of story?" "About Papa. About when you first met." So Lydia told them, her voice soft against the storm's rage. She told them about Philadelphia, about the literary society where she'd been giving a reading on contemporary poetry, about the tall, handsome stranger in the back row who'd asked such thoughtful questions afterward, about how Thomas Hartwell had courted her with books and long walks and talk of Western horizons where a man could build something real, something that lasted. "He made it sound like an adventure," she said, smiling at the memory. "Like we were going to be pioneers in a grand American story." "It is an adventure," Jonah said fiercely. "Papa was right. We're building something. We just need more time." Time. There was that word again, as if they could bargain with the winter, negotiate with hunger, make deals with an indifferent universe. Lydia was about to respond when the sound cut through the storm, a high, desperate scream that was almost human. Almost, but not quite. All 3 of them froze. "What was that?" Grace whispered. Another sound, closer now. Definitely a horse, in terrible distress. Then something else, a low moan that was absolutely, unmistakably human. Jonah was on his feet first, grabbing his father's old rifle from above the door. "Someone's out there." "Wait," Lydia started, but he was already pulling on his coat. "Mama, someone's dying out there. We can't just—" "I know." She was moving too, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders, her mind racing through calculations. Another mouth to feed, disease, danger, all the rational reasons to bar the door and pretend they'd heard nothing. But Thomas wouldn't have done that. Thomas had believed in frontier justice, in the code that said you help those who needed help because someday it might be you out there in the storm. "Grace, stay by the fire," Lydia ordered. "Don't open the door for anyone but us. But do as I say." The girl nodded, pulling the blankets tighter around herself, her eyes huge in the firelight. Lydia and Jonah stepped into the storm together. The cold was a physical assault, stealing breath, burning exposed skin. Snow immediately plastered Lydia's face, got into her eyes, her nose, her mouth. She could barely see 3 feet ahead, the world reduced to white chaos and screaming wind. "There!" Jonah pointed toward the tree line, maybe 20 yards distant. A dark shape writhed in the snow, the horse, its legs thrashing, steam rising from its body. And beside it, barely visible, another shape. A man. They struggled through drifts that came up to Lydia's thighs, Jonah breaking trail ahead of her. The snow tried to suck them down, hold them, freeze them in place. Every step was a battle. When they reached the fallen forms, Lydia's heart sank. The horse was magnificent, even in death. A black stallion with white socks and a blaze on its forehead. The kind of animal that cost more than her entire homestead. But its neck was bent at an impossible angle, broken. Its eyes were already glazing over, breath coming in short, panicked bursts. There was no saving it. The man was another story. He lay on his back in a spreading circle of blood, his coat torn open, his shirt soaked dark. He was maybe 35, with dark hair plastered to his head and several days' worth of beard on a face that was both rugged and refined. Despite the blood and the cold, Lydia could see he was handsome, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, the kind of face that belonged on a banker or a lawyer, not a dying cowboy in the Montana wilderness. "Is he dead?" Jonah's voice shook. Lydia knelt in the bloody snow and pressed her fingers to the man's throat. There. A pulse, thready and weak, but present. "He's alive. Help me get him up." "Mama, we can't." "Now, Jonah!" Between them, they got the man's arms around their shoulders and started the agonizing journey back to the cabin. He was dead weight, maybe 180 pounds of unconscious man, and every step felt like it might be their last. Lydia's legs screamed, her lungs burned, the wind tried to tear them apart. Halfway to the cabin, the man stirred and moaned. "Papers," he whispered, his voice barely audible under the storm. "Get the papers. Don't let them... Elizabeth, I'm sorry." Then he was unconscious again, his head lolling against Jonah's shoulder. They burst through the cabin door in a shower of snow and blood. Grace screamed. Lydia shouted at her to clear the table. "Help them! Move!" Working together, they wrestled the stranger onto the wooden surface, his blood immediately pooling beneath him. In the firelight, the extent of his injuries became clear. A bullet wound in his left shoulder, still seeping blood. Another graze across his ribs. His hands were torn and bleeding, frostbite already setting into his fingers. One ankle was swollen to twice its normal size. But it was the shoulder wound that terrified her, deep, the bullet still inside or passed through, she couldn't tell. If it had hit an artery, he'd bleed out before morning. "Grace, get every clean rag we have." "Jonah, more wood on the fire. I need light and heat. Move." The children scrambled to obey while Lydia tore open the man's shirt. Expensive fabric, she noticed distantly. Fine wool lined with silk. The buttons were real mother of pearl. This was no common cowboy. Beneath the shirt, his body told more stories. Old scars crisscrossed his chest and abdomen, knife wounds, bullet wounds, the kind of scarring that spoke of a violent life. But his hands, despite the current damage, showed signs of recent care. Clean nails. No permanent dirt. These were hands that had held pens and papers as often as they'd held reins and guns. "Who are you?" she thought, pressing a rag to the shoulder wound. The blood soaked through immediately, warm and frightening. "Is he going to die?" Grace whispered, her face pale. "Not if I can help it." Lydia forced confidence she didn't feel into her voice. "Get my sewing kit and the whiskey." "We don't have whiskey." "Then get the grain alcohol from the medicine box. Quickly." She'd set broken bones before, nursed Thomas through fevers, stitched up Jonah when he'd torn his leg on barbed wire. But this was different. This was worse. The bullet wound needed real medical attention. A doctor, antiseptic, proper tools. She had rags, a sewing needle, and alcohol that would burn like hellfire. It would have to be enough. For the next hour, Lydia worked while her children held the lantern and tried not to vomit. She poured alcohol into the wound. The man convulsed and screamed something about Elizabeth again, but didn't wake. She probed for the bullet with her smallest knife, cleaned and sterilized over the fire. Blood everywhere. So much blood. Finally, miraculously, she found it. A misshapen lump of lead lodged against his shoulder blade. She worked it out with trembling fingers, the man thrashing weakly beneath her hands. Then came the stitches, crude but functional, pulling torn flesh together in a way that would either heal or kill him with infection. When she finally stepped back, her hands were scarlet to the wrists, and she was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "Is it done?" Jonah asked. "For now." Lydia looked down at their unexpected guest. His face was gray with blood loss, his breathing shallow but steady. "We need to keep him warm, get him into dry clothes." "Whose clothes?" Grace asked practically. "Papa's?" The question hung heavy in the air. Thomas's trunk still sat in the corner, unopened since his death. Lydia had meant to go through it 100 times, but could never quite bring herself to face that final intimacy with loss. "Yes," she said quietly. "Papa's clothes." Together they stripped the stranger of his ruined finery and dressed him in Thomas's simple flannel and wool. The clothes were slightly too small. The stranger was taller, broader through the shoulders, but they would serve. They moved him to Lydia's bed, the only real bed in the cabin, and piled him with every spare blanket they could find. Lydia collapsed into the rocking chair, suddenly aware of how close she'd come to failing. If the stitches didn't hold, if infection set in, if his injuries were worse than she thought, if. "Mama, look!" Jonah held up the stranger's coat, the expensive one they'd stripped off. "There's something in the pocket." He pulled out a leather wallet, swollen with papers. Inside, Lydia found a small fortune, maybe $200 in bills, more money than she'd seen in 2 years. There was also a property deed, several official-looking documents, and a photograph of a beautiful woman with sad eyes. Elizabeth, she thought, the name he'd called out. But it was the other paper that made her blood run cold. A wanted poster, creased and stained, with a drawing that looked remarkably like their unconscious guest. The text was stark. "Wanted for questioning Cole Maddox. In connection with land disputes in Sweetwater County, $500 reward for information. Contact Sheriff Hale, Redemption, Montana Territory." "Mama?" Jonah's voice was tight with fear. "Who is he?" Lydia stared at the poster, then at the man in her bed, then at her children's frightened faces. She thought about the blood on her hands, the money in the wallet, the bullet wound that spoke of violence and danger. She thought about the choice she'd made, dragging him inside, saving his life. She thought about this fact that it was too late to unmake that choice now. "I don't know," she said finally, "but we're going to find out." Outside, the storm raged on, burying their homestead in snow, cutting them off from the world. Inside, the stranger, Cole Maddox, breathed softly in Thomas Hartwell's bed, his secrets wrapped around him like a shroud. And Lydia Hartwell, widow and mother, survivor and fool, sat by the fire and wondered what she'd brought into her home. The night stretched ahead, long and uncertain, full of questions that had no answers. But at least, for now, they were all still alive. That would have to be enough. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of being snowbound with a dying man and dwindling supplies. 3 days of Lydia changing blood-soaked bandages and spooning water between cracked lips. 3 days of her children watching the stranger with a mixture of fear and fascination, whispering questions she couldn't answer. Cole Maddox, if that was even his real name, drifted in and out of consciousness, fever burning through him like wildfire. He muttered about papers and property lines, about someone named Blackthorn and cattle that needed moving. Once he screamed Elizabeth's name so loudly that Grace started crying. "Who's Elizabeth?" the girl asked through her tears. "Why is he so sad?" "I don't know, sweetheart." Lydia wiped the stranger's forehead with a cool cloth, watching the fever sweat bead on his skin. "Maybe she's his wife." "Then where is she?" Good question. A man with a wife didn't usually end up shot and dying in the wilderness. Unless the wife was the one who shot him. Unless she was dead. Unless. On the second night when the fever was highest and Lydia thought they might lose him, Cole's eyes snapped open. They were blue, she saw. A startling clear blue that seemed to see right through her. "Where?" His voice was a ruined croak. "Where am I?" "Safe," Lydia said, pressing him back down when he tried to sit up. "You're safe. You were shot. Your horse broke its neck. We found you in the storm." His gaze swept the cabin, the rough walls, the single room, her children huddled by the fire watching him. Understanding dawned in those blue eyes, followed by something that looked like regret. "You shouldn't have." He coughed, wincing at the pain it caused. You shouldn't have brought me inside. Well, we did, so you'd better not die and make it a waste of effort. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. Practical woman. I have to be. He studied her face for a long moment, and Lydia had the uncomfortable feeling he was cataloging everything. Her hollow cheeks, her work-roughened hands, the desperation that surely showed in her eyes. What's your name? He asked finally. Lydia. Lydia Hartwell. She hesitated, then added, This is my homestead. Those are my children, Grace and Jonah. Hartwell. He repeated the name like he was testing it. Any relation to Thomas Hartwell? The question hit her like a fist. You knew my husband? Knew of him. Bought supplies and redemption a few times. Good man, people said. His eyes drifted to the children again. I'm sorry for your loss. The casual knowledge, the easy sympathy, it should have comforted her. Instead, it made her wary. How much did this stranger know about her family, about their situation? You should rest, she said, deflecting. Save your strength. Mrs. Hartwell. His hand shot out, catching her wrist with surprising strength for a man so badly injured. The men who shot me. Did you see them? Are they still out there? The fear in his voice was real, visceral. Lydia felt her own fear spike in response. No, we saw no one. Just you and the horse. His grip relaxed slightly. Good. That's good. Who shot you? But his eyes were already closing, fever dragging him back under. Don't trust anyone, he muttered. Don't trust. Papers are in the... Need to get the papers to... Then he was gone again, lost in delirium, leaving Lydia with more questions than answers. She looked down at his hand, still loosely circling her wrist. Even unconscious, even half dead, there was strength in him, power. The kind of presence that filled a room even when the man was barely breathing. Who are you really, Cole Maddox? And what have I brought into my home? Outside, the storm showed no signs of breaking. Inside, the fire burned low, and Lydia Hartwell kept watch over the stranger who might save them or destroy them. She wouldn't know which until he woke up, if he woke up. The wind howled its agreement, and somewhere in the distance a wolf answered with its own lonely cry. The night was far from over, and their story had only just begun. The fever broke on the morning of the fourth day. Lydia woke to find Cole Maddox watching her from the bed, his blue eyes clear and focused for the first time since they'd dragged him through the door. She'd fallen asleep in the rocking chair again, her neck stiff and aching, her body protesting every movement as she sat up. How long? His voice was still rough, but stronger than before. 4 days, almost 5. She rose slowly, testing her legs, and moved to the water bucket. The storm broke yesterday evening. You're lucky to be alive. Luck had nothing to do with it. That was skill. He tried to push himself up on his elbows and immediately went pale, sweat breaking out on his forehead. Jesus. Don't move. Lydia pressed a cup of water to his lips. You lost a lot of blood. The bullet was deep. I'm not a doctor. You could still die of infection. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin into Thomas's flannel shirt. When the cup was empty, he fell back against the pillow, breathing hard. You got the bullet out? I did. Then you are a doctor, the only kind that matters out here. His eyes traveled over her face again, that same cataloging assessment she'd noticed before. I owe you my life, Mrs. Hartwell. You don't owe me anything. Common decency says you help people who need help. Common decency. A bitter smile crossed his face. There's not much of that left in Montana territory. Trust me. Lydia pulled the rocking chair closer to the bed, settling into it with a weariness that went bone deep. Grace and Jonah were still asleep in their corner, curled together for warmth under the pile of quilts. The morning light coming through the window was thin and gray, but it was light. The storm had finally released its grip. I know who you are, she said quietly. I found the wanted poster in your coat. She watched his face carefully, looking for guilt or fear or anger. Instead, she saw resignation. Of course you did. He closed his eyes briefly. And you're wondering why you saved a wanted man, whether you made a mistake. whether your children are in danger. All of those things? The answer is complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Because if you're a danger to my family, fever or no fever, bullet wound or no bullet wound, I'll put you out in the snow myself. The fierce protectiveness in her voice surprised even her. Cole's eyes opened, and something that looked like respect flickered in their depths. I believe you would. He shifted carefully, trying to find a more comfortable position. The poster says wanted for questioning, not wanted dead or alive. There's a difference. Not much of one from where I'm sitting. Fair enough? He was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather his strength. How much do you know about land law in Montana Territory? Enough to file a homestead claim and try to prove it up. Not much beyond that. Then let me educate you. There are two kinds of people trying to own this land. People like you, who file legal claims through the land office, work the ground, build something real. And then there are people like Silas Blackthorne. The name came out like a curse. Lydia leaned forward. Who is he? A land baron. A thief. A man who believes Montana Territory belongs to whoever has the biggest ranch and the most guns. Cole's jaw tightened. He's been buying up homesteads and small ranches for years, sometimes legally, usually not. He makes offers people can't refuse because the alternative to selling is usually fire, or cattle poisoning, or accidents that aren't accidents at all. And you stood up to him. I own the Double M Ranch. 20,000 acres in the Sweetwater Valley, best grazing land in 3 counties. My father built it from nothing, and when he died 5 years ago, he left it to me. The words came harder now, edged with pain that had nothing to do with bullet wounds. Blackthorne wants it. He's made 3 offers, each one more insulting than the last. When I refused the 3rd time, things got ugly. The bullet wound. 3 of his men ambushed me on the road from Redemption. I was carrying the deed papers, survey maps, everything that proves the Double M is mine legally and clearly. They wanted those papers. I didn't want to give them up. Lydia's mind raced, piecing together implications. If Blackthorne has your papers, he can file false claims, forge bills of sale, make it look like I sold to him, or that I never had legal title in the first place. The land office is in Helena, 200 miles away. By the time anyone sorts out the truth, he'll have moved his cattle onto my range and hired enough guns to make it impossible to move them off again. Possession being 9/10 of the law. Exactly. Cole's hand moved to his shoulder, probing the bandages gingerly. I got away, but they shot my horse out from under me. Beautiful animal. I raised him from a colt. They killed him just to stop me. The grief in his voice was raw and real. Lydia thought of the magnificent black stallion dying in the snow, and despite everything, felt a pang of sympathy. I tried to make it to Redemption on foot, he continued. Thought maybe I could reach Sheriff Hale, get help, but the storm came up fast and I was losing blood. I don't remember much after that, just cold, and then your children's faces like angels in the snow. Lydia glanced at Grace and Jonah, still sleeping peacefully, unaware their mother was sitting 3 feet away from a man tangled in violence and conspiracy. The papers, she said. You kept mentioning papers when you were delirious. Where are they? Cole's expression turned grim. That's the problem. I don't know. They were in my saddlebags. When your children found me, did they see any bags? Leather, stamped with the Double M brand? No, just you and the horse. The snow was coming down hard. We could barely see. Damn. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, Lydia saw real despair in his face. If Blackthorne's men find them first, then you've lost your ranch. Not just me. There are 14 families working sections of the Double M on shares. Good people, hardworking people, who trust me to protect their stake in the land. If Blackthorne takes over, he'll run them off. They'll have nothing. The weight of it settled over Lydia like another blanket. This wasn't just one man's problem. This was a whole community, their lives and futures wrapped up in papers that might be buried in a snowdrift or already in enemy hands. When you're strong enough, she said slowly, we'll go look for them. The saddlebags. My son knows the area. If they're out there, we'll find them. Cole's eyes snapped open. Mrs. Hartwell, I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. Because if what you're saying is true, then Silas Blackthorne is the kind of man who'd burn out homesteaders and steal their land. the kind of man who might come for a widow and her children next. The truth hung between them, ugly and undeniable. Lydia had been so focused on immediate survival, food, firewood, getting through each day, that she hadn't thought much about the larger forces at work in the territory. But Cole's story made it clear there was no safety in isolation. The wolves were always circling, and they didn't care if you were minding your own business. "You're right," Cole said quietly. "Men like Blackthorn don't stop. They keep taking until someone stops them. Then we'd better make sure you're around to do the stopping." A sound from the corner made them both turn. Jonah was awake, sitting up in his nest of blankets, his dark eyes fixed on Cole with an intensity that made him look much older than 12. "How far is your ranch from here?" the boy asked. Cole glanced at Lydia, seeking permission. She nodded slightly. "About 18 miles northwest, up in the Sweetwater Valley." "And these men who shot you, they know you're wounded?" "They saw me fall. They know I'm hurt bad." Jonah's jaw set in that stubborn line Lydia knew too well. "Then they'll be looking for you, and when they don't find your body, they'll keep looking. They might come here." "Jonah?" Lydia started, but her son cut her off. "Mama, we're the only homestead for miles. If they're searching the area, they'll find us eventually, and when they do, they'll know we helped him." He looked at Cole. "Won't they?" "Yes," Cole said, and Lydia appreciated that he didn't lie, didn't try to spare the child's feelings. "If Blackthorn's men find me here, you'll all be in danger, which is why, as soon as I can walk, I need to leave." "You can barely sit up," Lydia pointed out. "You're going nowhere for at least a week, maybe 2. "I don't have 2 weeks. Blackthorn will move fast. He has to before word gets out about what he's doing. Every day I'm laid up here is a day closer to losing everything." The frustration in his voice was palpable. Lydia understood it. She'd felt that same helpless fury often enough, watching the seasons turn and the supplies dwindle, and knowing there was nothing she could do to change their circumstances. But she'd also learned something Thomas never quite grasped. Sometimes the only thing you could control was your own response to disaster. "Then we'll work with what we have," she said firmly. "Today you rest. Tomorrow maybe you can sit up properly. By the end of the week, if infection hasn't set in, you might be able to walk a bit. We'll search for your papers, we'll make a plan, and we'll deal with problems as they come." You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You survive one day at a time, you do the next right thing, and you don't give up." Cole studied her face for a long moment, and Lydia felt suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. She knew what he saw, a worn-out widow in a patched dress, too thin, too tired, trying to hold together a family and a homestead with nothing but determination and prayer. "You're remarkable," he said finally. "Has anyone ever told you that?" Heat rose in her cheeks. "I'm just doing what needs doing. That's what makes it remarkable." Before she could respond, Grace woke with a small cry, sitting bolt upright in her blankets. Her eyes found Cole immediately, and she scrambled closer to Jonah, seeking safety. "It's all right, sweetheart," Lydia said gently. "Mr. Maddox is awake. He's feeling better." "Is he still dying?" Grace whispered. "No, little one." Cole's voice softened in a way that surprised Lydia. "Thanks to your mama and your bravery, I'm not dying anymore. You saved my life." "We did?" "You found me in the storm. You helped bring me inside. That took courage." Grace's face brightened with pride, though she still kept close to her brother. "Jonah did most of it. He's strong." "I can see that." Cole looked at Jonah with something like respect. "How old are you, son?" 12, almost 13. Jonah straightened his shoulders. "And I can handle a rifle." "I bet you can. You have to, out here." There was an ease to the way Cole spoke to her children, natural and unforced, that made Lydia's chest tight. Thomas had been loving but often distracted, his mind always on the next project, the next improvement to the homestead. He'd loved his children fiercely, but he'd never quite been present with them the way Cole was in this moment, despite being wounded and weak. "Stop it," she told herself sharply. "Don't compare them. Don't do that to Thomas's memory." "I'm going to make breakfast," she announced, standing up abruptly. "We still have cornmeal. Maybe I can stretch it with some of the potatoes." "Mrs. Hartwell." Cole's voice stopped her. "I noticed you've been giving me water and broth. When's the last time you ate?" "I eat plenty." That's not what I asked. Lydia's jaw tightened. My children need to eat. You need to eat to heal. I'll eat when there's enough. Mama doesn't eat much, Grace offered helpfully. She says she's not hungry, but her stomach growls sometimes. Grace! Lydia felt her face burn with embarrassment. But Cole wasn't judging. Instead, his expression turned thoughtful. Mrs. Hartwell, when your son goes looking for my saddlebags, tell him to look for a leather pouch inside. It's got money in it, quite a bit of money. And food supplies. I was planning to be on the trail for several days. Hope flared in Lydia's chest before she could stop it. How much money? Enough to keep your family fed through the winter. Enough to buy supplies and firewood and whatever else you need. We can't take your money. You're not taking it. You're earning it. Room and board for a recuperating man plus hazard pay for the danger I've brought to your door. His voice turned serious. Please, Mrs. Hartwell, let me help the people who helped me. It's the least I can do. Pride warred with necessity in Lydia's heart. The money would change everything. They could buy cornmeal and beans, coffee and sugar, maybe even some bacon. They could survive until spring, until Jonah could hunt properly, until the homestead could be worked again. But taking money from a stranger, a man she barely knew, a man wanted for questioning by the law, it felt dangerous. Like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. We'll find the saddlebags first, she said finally. Then we'll talk about payment. Cole nodded, accepting the compromise. Fair enough, but I'll want to pay for the clothes I'm wearing too. They belong to your husband? The question was gentle, but it still hurt. Yes, Thomas. He died 2 years ago. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to be wearing his things, but I'm grateful for them. They're just clothes. They should be used. Lydia moved to the fire, needing to do something with her hands. He would have wanted someone to have them. As she mixed cornmeal batter and sliced the precious potatoes into thin rounds, she was acutely aware of Cole's eyes on her. Not in a threatening way, but with a kind of careful attention that made her nervous. Like he was trying to figure her out, understand what made her tick. How long have you been out here? He asked. In Montana Territory? 5 years. Thomas filed the claim when Jonah was 7. We came out from Philadelphia with such plans. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. We were going to build something grand. A real ranch someday, with cattle and horses and hired hands. He had such dreams. Dreams don't pay the bills. No, they don't. She flipped the potato rounds, watching them sizzle in the small amount of lard she'd allowed herself. But they're what keep you going when everything else falls apart, at least for a while. And when the dreams run out. Lydia looked at her children, Grace helping Jonah sort through the blankets, both of them moving with the careful efficiency of kids who'd learned to make every action count. Then you find new dreams, smaller ones, dreams that fit your circumstances. Like what? Like making it through the winter, like keeping my children safe and fed, like proving up this claim so we have something, some piece of ground we can call our own. She met his eyes. Like surviving long enough to see what comes next. Cole was quiet for a moment, then, those aren't small dreams, Mrs. Hartwell. Those are the biggest dreams there are. Something in his tone made her throat tight. She turned back to the fire, blinking rapidly against tears that had no place in a survival situation. Breakfast was meager, cornmeal cakes and potatoes, divided 4 ways with water to wash it down. But it was warm and filling enough, and for the first time in days, Lydia felt something like hope stirring in her chest. If they found Cole's money and supplies, they could make it. If his papers turned up, he could fight Blackthorn. If the weather held, Jonah could check the trap lines again. If. But this time the ifs felt less like desperate prayers and more like actual possibilities. After breakfast, while Cole dozed fitfully and Grace played a quiet game with her rag doll, Jonah pulled Lydia aside. Mama, I want to go look for the saddlebags now. The snow will be deep. You'll have to break trail. I know, but if Mr. Maddox is telling the truth, we need that money, and we need to find it before anyone else does. Lydia looked out the window at the glittering white expanse. The storm had dumped at least 2 feet of fresh snow, maybe more in the drifts. It would be hard, dangerous work. But Jonah was right. They needed to move fast. Take your father's rifle. Stay on familiar ground. If you see any riders, any strangers at all, you come straight home. Don't try to be a hero. I won't, Mama. I promise. And Jonah? She caught his arm, holding tight. If it's not there, if the saddlebags are gone or buried too deep, you come home anyway. Don't risk yourself for money. Nothing is worth losing you. He nodded, his expression solemn, and then he was bundling into his coat and heading for the door. Lydia watched him go with her heart in her throat, praying to a God who seemed to have forgotten them, that her son would come back safe. Cole stirred in the bed. He's a good boy. He's too young to be doing a man's work. Out here, children grow up fast. You know that. She did know that. She'd seen it happen to her own kids. Childhood compressed into a few short years before the frontier demanded they become something harder, something more resilient. Tell me about Elizabeth, she said suddenly, surprising herself. The woman in the photograph, your wife? Cole's face went still. What makes you think she's my wife? You called her name when you were fevered. You said you were sorry. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, she was my wife, past tense. She died 3 years ago. Cholera outbreak in Sweetwater. Took her and 20 other people in less than a week. I'm sorry. So am I. His voice was flat, carefully controlled. We'd only been married 2 years. Hadn't even had time to start a family. She wanted children so badly. She would have been a wonderful mother. The grief in those words was old but not healed. Lydia recognized it. She carried the same kind of grief for Thomas, a wound that never quite closed but learned to live around. Is that why you were alone on the road? No wife waiting at home to worry about you? No one waits for me anymore, Mrs. Hartwell. The Double M has hired hands, a foreman who runs the day-to-day operations. But no family, just me and 20,000 acres of land that my father bled for and my wife loved. He closed his eyes. Blackthorn wants to take it. I can't let him. It's all I have left of them. Understanding washed over Lydia. This wasn't just about land or money or legal disputes. This was about memory, about honoring the dead by protecting what they'd built. Then we'll help you keep it, she said firmly, because I understand what it means to fight for something that's all you have left. Cole's eyes opened, meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Why? Why would you risk your safety, your children's safety, for a stranger? Because Thomas would have done the same, because it's the right thing to do. And because, she paused, choosing her words carefully, because I'm tired of being helpless. I'm tired of just surviving, just barely making it through each day with nothing to show for it but more exhaustion. Maybe helping you is helping ourselves too. Maybe if we stand up to men like Blackthorn, we make the territory safer for everyone. Or maybe you get yourselves killed. Maybe. But at least we'd die fighting, not starving slowly in a cabin while the world forgets we exist. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended, revealing the depths of her desperation. Cole's expression softened. You won't be forgotten, Lydia Hartwell. Not by me. The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her. She stood abruptly, needing distance. Rest now. You need your strength. She busied herself with cleaning up from breakfast, scrubbing the tin plates with snow and sand, putting everything in its place. Grace came to help, her small hands careful with the precious dishes. Mama, is Mr. Maddox going to stay with us? Just until he's healed, then he has to go back to his ranch. I like him. He's nice. He is nice. But don't get too attached, sweetheart. He's not ours to keep. Even as she said it, Lydia felt the lie in the words. In just a few days, Cole Maddox had become woven into the fabric of their lives in a way that would be hard to untangle. His presence filled the cabin, made it feel less empty, less desperate. And that was dangerous, because he would leave eventually, and they'd be alone again. The day stretched on. Cole slept fitfully, sometimes waking to drink water or ask quiet questions about the homestead. Grace played her endless games, making stories with her doll about princesses and cowboys and magic horses. Lydia mended clothes, each stitch a small act of defiance against the entropy that threatened to swallow them whole. And she waited for Jonah to come home. By late afternoon, when the winter sun was already sinking toward the horizon, her worry had crystallized into full-blown fear. He'd been gone too long. Something had happened. She was reaching for her shawl, preparing to go look for him, when the door burst open. Jonah stumbled inside, snow-covered and triumphant, dragging 2 leather saddlebags behind him. I found them! His face was flushed with cold and excitement. They were about 30 yards from where the horse fell, half buried in a drift. I almost missed them. Lydia pulled him into a fierce hug, not caring that he was soaking her with melting snow. Thank God. I was so worried. I'm fine, Mama. But look, there's food and everything. Together they opened the saddlebags on the table. Inside was a treasure trove. Dried beef and hardtack, coffee beans, a small sack of sugar, matches, ammunition for a rifle. And in the inner pocket, wrapped in oilcloth, a leather pouch heavy with coins and bills. Cole had pushed himself up on his elbows, watching with an expression of relief so profound it was almost painful. The papers, he rasped. Are they there? Jonah pulled out a larger bundle, also wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were official documents, maps, the deed to the Double M Ranch, survey records, everything Cole had said would be there. All intact, Jonah reported. A little damp but readable. Cole sagged back against the pillows. Thank God. Thank you, Jonah. You just saved 14 families from losing their homes. Did I really? You really did. The boy's face glowed with pride. Lydia felt her own chest swell with it. Her son, brave and capable, making a real difference in the world. They counted the money together. $340, more cash than Lydia had seen in her entire life. Cole insisted she take $100 immediately for room and board and supplies. But that's too much, she protested. It's not enough. Not for saving my life and risking yours to find those papers. Take it, Mrs. Hartwell. Buy food, buy firewood. Buy whatever your family needs to make it through the winter, in comfort instead of desperation. The weight of the bills in her hand felt like a dream, like something that would vanish if she looked away. I don't know what to say. Say you'll go to town tomorrow and get supplies. Say you'll let your children eat until they're full. Say you'll accept help when it's offered. She met his eyes, saw the sincerity there, the genuine desire to repay what she'd given him. And she realized that accepting help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. It was the frontier code in action, the give and take that allowed people to survive in harsh country. All right, she said softly. We'll go to town tomorrow. And thank you, Mr. Maddox, truly. Cole, please. Mr. Maddox was my father. Cole. The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate somehow. Thank you, Cole. That night, they feasted. Lydia made real coffee, the first in months, and the smell alone was enough to make her weep. She fried thick slices of bacon and served them with potatoes and cornbread made with real sugar. The children's faces were almost comical in their delight, eating until their bellies were actually full for the first time in weeks. Cole ate sitting up, still pale but clearly stronger, his appetite returning with his health. He told them stories about the Double M, about cattle drives and spring roundups, about the way the valley looked in summer when wildflowers covered the hills in waves of purple and gold. It sounds beautiful, Grace sighed, her imagination clearly captured. It is. Maybe someday you can visit. See it for yourself. Really? Really, you saved my life, little one. That makes you part of the Double M family forever. Lydia felt something shift in her chest at those words. Family. They'd been so alone for so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than their small, desperate circle. Later, after the children were asleep and the fire had burned down to embers, Cole called Lydia over to the bed. There's something you should know, he said quietly. Blackthorn's men, they're not the kind to give up. When they realize I've survived, when word gets out that I still have the deed papers, they'll come looking. Let them come. We'll be ready. I admire your courage, but you need to understand what you're up against. Silas Blackthorn is a dangerous man. He's got money, influence, a private army of gunmen. He doesn't lose gracefully. Then he's going to have to learn. Lydia's voice was steel. This is our home. We didn't survive 2 years of hardship just to be run off by a bully. Cole smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You remind me of Elizabeth. She was fierce like that too. Wouldn't back down from anything. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both, maybe. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, not quite touching. I won't let anything happen to you or your children. I promise you that. We can take care of ourselves. I know, but you don't have to. Not anymore. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to examine. Lydia pulled her hand back, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment, alone with a man in the darkness, her children asleep, the whole winter world holding its breath outside. "You should rest," she said, standing. "Tomorrow we'll go to town, get supplies. Maybe talk to Sheriff Hale about what's happening. Be careful in town. Blackthorn has eyes everywhere. If word gets out that you're helping me, then we'll deal with it." She met his gaze steadily. "We're survivors, Cole. All of us. We'll do what we have to do." He nodded slowly, accepting her determination, if not entirely agreeing with it. "Good night, Lydia." "Good night." She settled into the rocking chair, wrapping herself in a quilt, and stared into the dying fire. Tomorrow, they would go to Redemption. Tomorrow, they would buy food and supplies and take the first steps towards something that looked less like survival and more like living. Tomorrow, the real complications would begin. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Lydia Hartwell felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggles. Inside, a widow, her children, and a wounded cowboy slept in the warmth of a shared purpose, unaware that their lives were about to become infinitely more complicated. And somewhere in the darkness, men with guns and malice planned their next move in a war that was only beginning. The town of Redemption sat in the morning cold like a promise half-kept, its single muddy street lined with false-fronted buildings that tried to look more permanent than they were. Lydia guided the wagon down the rutted road, Jonah beside her on the seat, and Grace bundled in the back with the empty crates they'd brought for supplies. Cole had insisted on lending them his money for the wagon rental from the livery, another expense she'd protested and he'd overruled. "You can't carry a month's worth of supplies on your backs," he'd said that morning, still too weak to stand for more than a few minutes, but stubborn enough to argue. "Take the money, rent the wagon, come back safe." The way he'd said those last 3 words, with an intensity that seemed to carry more weight than simple concern, had made something flutter in Lydia's chest. She'd pushed the feeling away, focusing instead on the practical matter of getting to town and back before dark. Now, as they pulled up in front of Miller's General Store, she felt the weight of eyes on them. Redemption was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and a widow woman suddenly appearing with money to spend would raise questions. She'd prepared her story. A cousin back east had sent funds, but lies had a way of unraveling in small towns. "Stay close," she told the children as they climbed down. "Don't wander off." Inside the store, the warmth from the pot-bellied stove was like a benediction. Lydia breathed in the mingled scents of coffee and tobacco, leather and pickles, all the smells of civilization she'd almost forgotten. Behind the counter, Augustus Miller looked up from his ledger, his weathered face registering surprise. "Mrs. Hartwell, wasn't expecting to see you today. How are you folks managing out there?" "Well enough, Mr. Miller. I've come to buy supplies." She pulled out Cole's bills, watching the merchant's eyes widen slightly. "Quite a lot of supplies, actually." "I see that. Business must be good." "Family back east," Lydia said smoothly, hating the lie but knowing it was necessary. "My late husband's brother, he sent money for the children." Miller nodded, accepting the story without pressing. "That's real kind of him. What can I get you?" For the next hour, Lydia moved through the store like a woman in a dream, pointing out items she'd thought she'd never afford again. 50 pounds of flour, 20 pounds of cornmeal, sugar, coffee, salt, baking powder, dried beans and rice. Bacon, so much bacon her mouth watered just looking at it. Canned goods, tomatoes and peaches, luxuries she'd denied herself for 2 years. Lamp oil. Matches, needles and thread. Blankets, real wool blankets that would actually keep them warm. Grace followed her mother with wide eyes, occasionally reaching out to touch some treasure before pulling her hand back, as if afraid it would all disappear. Jonah helped carry items to the counter, his face carefully neutral but his shoulders straighter than they'd been in months. "Anything else?" Miller asked, tallying the growing pile. Lydia hesitated, then said, "Medicine, carbolic acid, bandages, laudanum if you have it, and whiskey, the good kind, not rotgut." "Someone sick?" "Just restocking. You never know when you'll need it." Another lie, but necessary. She couldn't risk anyone knowing about Cole. Miller disappeared into the back and returned with the medical supplies. As he added them to her order, the bell over the door jangled and 3 men walked in. Lydia knew immediately that something was wrong. The men moved with a dangerous confidence, their hands never far from the guns at their hips. They wore range clothes, dusty denim, and leather, but their boots were expensive, their gun belts well-oiled. These weren't cowboys just come in from the trail. These were hired guns. The tallest of the 3 had a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, pale against his weathered skin. He swept the store with a practiced gaze that took in every person, every exit, every potential threat. His eyes lingered on Lydia for a moment too long. "Help you, gentlemen?" Miller's voice had gone carefully neutral. "Just looking around?" The scarred man's voice was surprisingly soft. "Haven't been in redemption for a spell. Wanted to see what's changed. Not much changes here. That's what I like about small towns. Everybody knows everybody. Makes finding people real easy." The threat in those words was barely veiled. Lydia kept her eyes on the counter, her heart hammering, praying the children would stay quiet. "We're looking for someone," another man spoke up, shorter and stockier than the first. "Cowboy, dark hair, maybe wounded. Might have come through here in the last few days." Miller's expression didn't change. "Haven't seen anyone like that. Winter keeps most folks close to home." "You sure about that? Because we heard tell he was heading this direction, and we'd be real grateful to anyone who could point us his way. Grateful enough to pay for the information." "Can't sell what I don't have. Now, if you gentlemen aren't buying anything, we'll buy." The scarred man pulled out a silver dollar and flipped it to Miller. "Ammunition, .45 caliber, and information, if you develop any." He turned then, his gaze landing on Lydia again. She felt stripped bare under that look, as if he could see right through her lies to the wounded man recovering in her cabin. "Ma'am," he touched his hat brim mockingly. "Those are some heavy supplies for a woman alone. You got help getting them home?" "My son will manage." Lydia's voice came out steadier than she felt. "We're used to hard work." "I bet you are. What's your name?" Every instinct screamed at her to lie, but lies about identity were too easily checked in a small town. "Hartwell. Lydia Hartwell." "Hartwell." He repeated the name slowly, as if tasting it. "You got a homestead hereabouts?" 14 miles north." "All alone out there? Just you and the children? That's dangerous country for a woman on her own." "We manage." The scarred man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure you do. Well, Mrs. Hartwell, if you see any strangers around your place, wounded cowboys, men asking questions, you let Sheriff Hale know. There's dangerous folks about." "I'll do that." He held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded to his companions. They took their ammunition and left, the bell jangling behind them like a warning. The silence in the store was thick enough to cut. Miller cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hartwell, those men, I don't know them," Lydia said quickly, "and I haven't seen any wounded cowboys." "I didn't ask if you had." Miller's eyes were sharp, knowing. "But if you had, and if those men were looking for him, I'd say you'd be wise to be very careful. Those were Blackthorn's men. The scarred one is Jack Reese. He's killed at least 4 men that I know of." Lydia's blood ran cold. "They said they were looking for someone." "They're looking for Cole Maddox. Word is he's got papers that prove the Double M Ranch is his, free and clear. Blackthorn wants those papers, and he wants Maddox dead." Miller leaned closer, his voice dropping. "I don't know if you've seen Cole, and I'm not asking. But if you have, you need to know what you're mixed up in. Blackthorn plays for keeps." "I appreciate the warning." Miller studied her face for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "Your total comes to $47.30, but I'm going to give you the family discount. Call it 40 even. And I'm going to throw in extra ammunition, the kind that fits that rifle your boy's carrying, just in case." Lydia met his eyes, seeing the understanding there. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." "Don't thank me, just be careful. And tell Cole, if you see him, that he's got friends in redemption. Not everyone sold their soul to Silas Blackthorn." She paid for the supplies and they loaded the wagon quickly, Lydia's hands trembling as she lifted crates. Those men had been so close, had looked right at her, and somehow she'd kept her face blank, her voice steady. But now, with the danger past, reaction set in. She had to grip the wagon seat to keep her hands from shaking. "Mama, who were those men?" Grace whispered as they pulled away from the store. "Bad men, sweetheart. The kind we stay far away from." Were they looking for Mr. Maddox? Too smart. Her daughter was too smart. Yes, which is why we're not going to mention him to anyone. Not ever. Do you understand? Both children nodded solemnly. Jonah's hand had moved to rest on the rifle between them, his young face set in grim lines. They were halfway home when Lydia saw the rider. He sat on his horse on a rise to the east, silhouetted against the pale winter sky, watching their wagon. Too far away to identify, close enough to be a clear threat. After a moment he turned and rode away, disappearing over the ridge. "Did you see that?" Jonah asked. "I saw." Lydia urged the horses faster, every instinct screaming at her to run. "Get home, bar the door." "Hold on!" The wagon jolted over the frozen ruts, supplies rattling in the back. Grace held on tight, her face pale. The homestead seemed impossibly far away, and Lydia couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on them, watching, waiting. When they finally pulled into the yard, Cole was standing in the doorway despite his wounds, Thomas's rifle in his hands. The sight of him there, armed and alert, sent relief flooding through Lydia so powerfully she felt dizzy. "What happened?" he asked as Jonah helped her down. "You're white as a sheet." "Blackthorn's men in town." The words tumbled out as they rushed inside, Jonah and Grace helping to unload the wagon while Lydia told Cole everything. "They were asking about you, looking for you, and there was a rider on the way home, watching us." Cole's face had gone hard. All traces of the gentle man who'd told stories to her children vanished. This was the man who'd survived an ambush, who'd fought to protect his land against overwhelming odds. "Did they follow you?" "I don't think so. We kept watch. But Cole, they know something. The scarred one, Reese, Miller called him, he looked at me like he could see right through me." "Jack Reese." Cole spat the name like a curse. "Blackthorn's #1 killer. If he's in redemption, things are worse than I thought." He moved to the window, scanning the tree line. "We need to fortify. Board up the windows, reinforce the door. If they come here, we'll deal with it." Lydia's voice was steadier than she felt. "But maybe they won't. Maybe we covered our tracks well enough." "Maybe isn't good enough. Not with Reese involved. He's like a bloodhound. Once he's got a scent, he doesn't stop." Cole turned back to her, his blue eyes intense. "Lydia, I need you to listen carefully. If Blackthorn's men come here, if they find me, you have to tell them the truth. Tell them I forced you to help me, that you were afraid for your children. Tell them whatever they want to hear to keep yourself safe." "Absolutely not." "Lydia, no." She moved closer to him, her own determination matching his. "We made a choice when we dragged you inside. We made it again when we went looking for your papers, when we took your money, when we decided to help you fight. We're in this now, all the way. I won't betray you to save myself." "Even if it costs your children?" The question hung between them like a blade. Lydia thought of Grace and Jonah, thought of all the promises she'd made to keep them safe. But she also thought about the kind of people they'd become if they learned that safety came at the cost of honor. "My children need to learn that some things are worth fighting for, that you stand up to bullies even when it's dangerous, that you keep your word even when it's hard." She held his gaze. "Thomas believed that. He died believing it. I won't dishonor his memory by teaching our children anything different." Something shifted in Cole's expression. Respect, admiration, and something deeper that Lydia wasn't ready to name. "You're a remarkable woman, Lydia Hartwell. So you keep saying, now help me figure out how to defend this place, because if those men are coming, I want to be ready." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Cole, still weak but mobile, directed operations like a general planning a siege. Jonah helped him nail boards across the windows, leaving narrow gaps to shoot through if necessary. They moved furniture to create barriers, positioned water buckets in case of fire, loaded every gun they had, and placed them at strategic points throughout the cabin. Grace, too young to help with the heavy work, was assigned the task of organizing their supplies and preparing food that could be eaten cold if necessary. She worked with a serious concentration that broke Lydia's heart. 9 years old, preparing for a battle. This wasn't the childhood Lydia had imagined for her. As the sun set, painting the snow in shades of orange and red. Cole called them all together. Listen to me carefully. If shooting starts, Grace and Jonah, you get down on the floor behind the bed. You stay there no matter what you hear, no matter what happens. You don't come out until your mother or I tell you it's safe. Understood? Yes, sir. Jonah's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. Good. Lydia, you know how to shoot that rifle? Thomas taught me. I'm not a great shot, but I can hit what I'm aiming at if it's close enough. Close enough is all we need. You take the window facing south. That's the most likely approach. I'll take the north. Jonah, you watch the east side. If you see anything at all, you call out. Don't try to be a hero. Just give us information and stay low. They took their positions as darkness fell, the cabin silent except for the crackle of the fire and the whistle of wind through the cracks in the walls. Lydia knelt by her window, rifle across her knees, and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Her whole body felt wound tight, every sound making her jump. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Maybe they're not coming, Grace whispered from her position behind the bed. Maybe, Cole agreed. Or maybe they're just waiting for us to let our guard down. At midnight, Jonah's voice cut through the silence. Movement. East side. Can't tell how many. Lydia's heart kicked into a gallop. She moved to a different window, peering through the narrow gap between boards. At first she saw nothing but darkness and snow. Then, there, a shadow moving between the trees, low and careful. I see it, she confirmed. More on the south. Cole's voice was tight. At least 3. They're surrounding us. What do we do? We wait. Let them make the first move. Maybe they're just scouting. But Lydia knew better. Men who surrounded a house at midnight weren't scouts. They were an attack force. The attack came from 2 directions at once. Fire arrows arced through the darkness, slamming into the roof and the woodpile. Flames caught immediately, hungry and bright. At the same time, gunshots erupted from the tree line, bullets punching through the walls and thudding into the furniture they'd barricaded. Jonah! Grace, down! Lydia screamed. She aimed through her window gap and fired at a muzzle flash, was rewarded with a cry of pain. Beside her, Cole's rifle barked again and again, methodical and deadly. The roof's catching, Jonah yelled. Smoke was already beginning to seep through the ceiling boards. Forget the roof. Keep shooting. Cole's voice cut through the chaos. They want to flush us out. Don't give them the satisfaction. More fire arrows. The barn was burning now too, flames leaping into the night sky. Lydia could hear the panicked sounds of their cow and the 3 chickens they'd managed to keep alive, trapped in the inferno. We can't let the animals burn, Grace sobbed. We can't help them. Lydia's voice broke on the words. I'm sorry, baby. There's nothing we can do. The shooting intensified. Bullets everywhere, splintering wood, shattering glass, filling the air with the smell of gunpowder and smoke. Lydia fired until her rifle was empty, reloaded with shaking hands, fired again. She hit one man as he tried to rush the door. He went down screaming, clutching his leg. Then came a sound that stopped her heart, a massive crack from above. The main beam, Cole shouted. It's giving way. Lydia looked up in time to see the burning roof beam split down the middle. It fell in terrible slow motion, a flaming sword dropping straight toward where Jonah crouched by the east window. Jonah, move! But her son was frozen, staring up at his death, unable to process fast enough to save himself. Cole moved. He threw himself across the cabin, grabbed Jonah by the collar, and hurled the boy backward toward the bed. The beam crashed down exactly where Jonah had been kneeling, sending up a shower of sparks and flames. Cole tried to dodge, but wasn't fast enough. The burning timber caught him across the shoulders and back, slamming him to the floor. Cole! Lydia abandoned her post, rushing to him. Together with Jonah, she heaved the beam off his body. His shirt was burned away, the skin beneath already blistering, but he was conscious, his eyes clear despite the pain. I'm all right, he gasped. Get back to your window. They'll rush us while we're distracted. You're hurt. I said get back. The command in his voice overrode her concern. Lydia grabbed her rifle and returned to her position just as 2 men broke cover, running toward the cabin. She fired, missed, fired again. The second shot caught one in the chest. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The other man dove behind the water trough. We can't stay here! Smoke was filling the cabin now, thick and choking. The roof was fully engulfed, pieces falling in burning chunks. The whole place is going to collapse! The barn, Cole wheezed, pushing himself up despite his burns. It's stone. The walls will hold even if the roof burns. We can defend it better than here. Lydia, grab the children and the supplies you can carry. Go now, while they're regrouping. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. I'm right behind you. Go! Lydia grabbed Grace and pulled Jonah to his feet. Run to the barn. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run. I'm right behind you. She threw open the door and they burst into the night, running across the yard while bullets kicked up snow around them. Grace stumbled and Lydia hauled her up, practically carrying her daughter. Behind them, Cole limped out of the burning cabin, firing as he came, covering their retreat. They reached the barn and threw themselves through the door. The interior was chaos. The roof was burning, but the stone walls were holding, and the animals were gone, either dead or escaped. Lydia slammed the door and dropped the bar, then turned to assess their situation. It was bad. The barn was filling with smoke, the roof wouldn't last long, and through the gaps in the stone she could see shadows moving, surrounding them again. We're trapped, Jonah said, his voice hollow. Cole leaned against the wall, his face gray with pain, blood seeping through his burned shirt. Not trapped, fortified. Big difference. These walls are 3 feet thick, bullets won't penetrate, and there's only one door, which means they have to come at us head on. But the smoke will clear through the roof as it burns. We just need to hold out. He met Lydia's eyes. You still with me? Was she? Every rational part of her brain screamed to surrender, to give up Cole and beg for mercy. But she looked at her children, frightened but resolute, trusting her to make the right choice. And she knew she couldn't do it. I'm with you. Good. Cole checked his rifle, counted his remaining ammunition. Because this is where we make our stand. Outside, a voice called through the smoke and flames. Maddox, we know you're in there. Send out the papers and we'll let the woman and children go. Don't believe them, Cole shouted back. They'll kill us all. We just want what's ours. The double M belongs to Mr. Blackthorne now. You lost, Maddox. Give up. Cole moved to a gap in the stones and fired, was answered by a volley that sent chips of rock flying. Come and take them. The battle settled into a grim stalemate. Blackthorne's men couldn't get in without exposing themselves to defensive fire, but Cole's group couldn't get out, and the smoke was getting worse. Lydia tied cloth over the children's faces, trying to filter the worst of it, but they were all coughing, eyes streaming. Time became elastic, meaningless. Minutes felt like hours. The roof beam groaned and shifted, threatening to collapse like the cabins had. Lydia fired at shadows, conserving ammunition, praying for something, anything to change. Then she heard it, hoofbeats, a lot of them. More men coming, Jonah called out. From the north, maybe a dozen riders. This was it then, the end. Blackthorne had called in reinforcements. They'd be overrun, killed, the papers taken. All of this would have been for nothing. But the gunfire that erupted was aimed at Blackthorne's men, not at the barn. Double M riders, Cole's voice cracked with emotion. That's my foreman's war cry. They found us. Through the smoke and chaos, Lydia saw new figures joining the fight. Cowboys on horseback, firing with practiced accuracy, driving Blackthorne's men back. The siege broke as the attackers fled into the darkness, pursued by the double M hands. Then there was just silence, broken only by the crackle of flames and the sound of approaching horses. Cole! A man's voice, rough with concern. Cole Maddox, you in there? Frank, we're here. Hold your fire. Lydia lowered her rifle as the barn door swung open. A grizzled cowboy in his 50s stood there, taking in the scene, the wounded Cole, the woman and children covered in soot and blood, the smoking ruins around them. Jesus Christ, boss, we thought you were dead. Almost was. These folks saved my life. Cole swayed and nearly fell. Lydia and Frank caught him, lowering him carefully to the ground. Frank Garrett, meet Lydia Hartwell and her children. They're under double M protection now. Anyone who touches them answers to me. Understood. Frank knelt beside Cole, examining his burns and the reopened bullet wound. We need to get you to a doctor. Later. Right now we need to secure this area. Blackthorne's men might come back. They won't. Not tonight. We killed 2, wounded 3 more. They're scattered. Frank looked at Lydia with something like awe. Ma'am, I don't know what you did to earn my boss's loyalty, but you've got the gratitude of every hand on the double M. What do you need? Lydia looked around at the burning ruins of everything she and Thomas had built. The cabin was gone, collapsed into a pile of flaming rubble. The barn's roof was caving in even as they stood there. Their supplies, their furniture, everything they owned had been destroyed. A place to sleep tonight, she said numbly. After that, I don't know. You'll come to the double M, Cole said, his voice firm despite his injuries. All of you. Stay as long as you need. It's the least I can do. Cole, we can't impose. It's not an imposition. It's a debt. You saved my life, risked everything for me. Now let me return the favor. His hand found hers squeezed gently. Please, Lydia, let me help you. She wanted to refuse, to maintain her pride and independence, but as she looked at her children, exhausted, traumatized, homeless, she knew she had no choice. They needed shelter, safety, time to recover and plan what came next. All right, she whispered, just until we figure things out. Cole's smile was weak but genuine. That's all I ask. The Double M riders helped them gather what few possessions had survived, a trunk of clothes that had been in the barn, some tools, Thomas's rifle. Everything else was ash and memory. As they rode away from the burning homestead, Lydia looked back one last time. 2 years of work, gone in a single night. Thomas's dreams reduced to smoke and cinders. She should have felt devastated, destroyed. Instead, she felt something unexpected. Freedom. The homestead had been Thomas's dream, not hers. She'd worked it out of duty and necessity, trying to honor his memory and provide for their children. But it had been a burden, a weight that grew heavier with each passing season. Now it was gone, and in its place was possibility. Frightening, uncertain possibility, but possibility nonetheless. Grace had fallen asleep against her side, exhausted by terror and adrenaline. Jonah rode in silence, his young face carved from stone, processing the violence he'd witnessed. And ahead, Cole swayed in his saddle, wounded and exhausted but alive, leading them toward a future none of them could have imagined a week ago. Mama? Grace stirred, her voice small and lost. Where are we going? Lydia smoothed her daughter's hair, pressed a kiss to her forehead. Somewhere safe, sweetheart. Somewhere we can rest. Will Mr. Maddox be okay? I think so. He's tough, like us. I was so scared. I know, baby. I was too. But we made it. We all made it. Together, Grace mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. We made it together. Together. The word echoed in Lydia's mind as they rode through the frozen night. They'd faced the fire and survived. They'd stood against evil and refused to break. And somewhere in that crucible of violence and fear, they'd become something more than they were. Not just a widow and her children and a wounded stranger, but a family forged in flames. The Double M Ranch lay ahead, a promise of safety and rest. Behind them, the burning homestead lit up the night sky, a beacon visible for miles. Let Blackthorn see it, Lydia thought. Let him know that we survived, that we're still fighting, that we'll never stop fighting. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. But for tonight, for this moment, they were alive and together, and that would have to be enough. The Double M Ranch sprawled across the Sweetwater Valley like something from a dream. Even in winter, even in the pre-dawn darkness, Lydia could sense the scale of it. The miles of fencing, the massive barns and outbuildings, the main house rising 3 stories against the starlit sky. This wasn't a homestead scratched from wilderness. This was an empire. Frank Garrett led them through the main gate as the first gray light touched the eastern horizon. Ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse, drawn by the commotion, their faces registering shock as they saw Cole's condition. Get Doc Morrison, Frank barked at a young cowboy. Tell him it's urgent, and wake up Maria. We need the guest rooms prepared. Move! They carried Cole into the house, through a massive front door into a parlor that could have fit Lydia's entire cabin twice over. Leather furniture, thick rugs, oil paintings on the walls, wealth beyond anything she'd imagined. Her mud-caked boots left tracks on the polished floor, and she wanted to apologize, wanted to take them off, but there was no time. A Mexican woman in her 50s appeared, gray-streaked hair and a neat bun, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. She took one look at Cole and started issuing orders in rapid-fire Spanish. Two younger women materialized, helping carry him up the stairs to a bedroom. "I'm Maria Santos," the woman told Lydia. "I run this house. You and your children come with me. We'll get you cleaned up while the doctor sees to Cole." "I should stay with him. I dressed his wounds before, and you did a fine job keeping him alive, but now he needs proper medical care. You need rest, food, and clean clothes. Come." Her tone brooked no argument. "Your children are about to collapse." It was true. Grace could barely keep her eyes open, and even Jonah was swaying on his feet. Lydia let Maria guide them to a bedroom that was larger than the cabin had been, with a real bed covered in quilts and a washstand with actual porcelain basin. "There's a bathing room through that door," Maria said, gesturing. "Hot water is already coming up. Clean clothes in the wardrobe. They belong to Cole's wife, God rest her soul. They should fit well enough. I'll bring food once you're settled." Elizabeth's clothes. Lydia felt strange wearing a dead woman's dresses, but she had nothing else. Her own clothes were torn, burned, and reeking of smoke. She helped Grace and Jonah wash first, scrubbing the soot from their skin, checking for injuries. Miraculously, aside from some minor burns and bruises, they were unharmed. By the time she'd gotten them into clean nightclothes and into bed, both children were already asleep. Lydia stood watching them for a long moment, her throat tight. They'd survived. Against all odds, despite everything, her children were safe. She bathed quickly, the hot water a luxury she'd almost forgotten existed. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her face was gaunt, older than her 32 years, with new lines etched by hardship and fear. But her eyes held something new, strength maybe, or stubbornness. The look of someone who'd walked through fire and refused to burn. Elizabeth's dress fit reasonably well, though the woman had been taller and fuller-figured than Lydia. It was fine wool, deep blue, with pearl buttons and lace at the collar. The kind of dress a gentleman's wife wore. Lydia ran her hands over the fabric, wondering about the woman who'd owned it. The woman Cole had loved. The woman he still mourned. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Maria entered with a tray of food, bread, cheese, cold chicken, coffee that smelled like heaven. "The children are sleeping?" "Like the dead." Lydia winced at her word choice. I know what you mean." "They're safe now. You all are." Maria set the tray on a small table and poured coffee. "Eat. You look half-starved." Lydia wanted to protest, to maintain her dignity, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. She ate like she'd been taught not to, quickly, efficiently, getting calories down because who knew when the next meal would come. Old habits from 2 years of scarcity. "How is he?" she asked between bites. "Cole?" "Alive, which is more than he should be. Doc Morrison says the shoulder wound was expertly treated. Says whoever did it knew what they were doing. That was you?" Lydia nodded. "I'm not a nurse, but I've dealt with injuries before. Frontier life, you know." "Frontier life?" Maria's expression was knowing. "That's a polite way of saying you've suffered more than any woman should have to. Frank told me about your homestead. I'm sorry." The sympathy in her voice threatened to crack Lydia's carefully maintained composure. "It was just a place. We're alive. That's what matters. Just a place that you worked yourself nearly to death trying to keep. Don't minimize it. You have a right to grieve." "I don't have time to grieve. I have to figure out what comes next. Where we'll go, how we'll survive. I can't impose on Cole's hospitality forever." Maria studied her over the rim of her coffee cup. "You don't know him very well yet, do you? Cole Maddox doesn't do anything halfway. If he's invited you here, he means for you to stay as long as you need, probably longer. He owes me nothing. I did what anyone would do. But most people wouldn't have. Most people would have left him to die rather than risk Blackthorn's wrath. You didn't. That means something to Cole. It means something to all of us who depend on him." Maria leaned forward. "This ranch, all these people working here, we're not just employees, we're family. And Cole protects his family with everything he has. He'll do the same for you." The words settled over Lydia like a blanket, warm and suffocating. She'd been alone for so long, responsible for everything, unable to rely on anyone. The idea of being protected, of being part of something larger, it was terrifying. I don't know how to be someone's charity case. Then don't be. Work. If it makes you feel better, there's always work on a ranch this size. Teach the hands to read and write. Half of them can't, and it's a shame. Help Maria with the household accounts. Contribute in whatever way makes you feel useful, but stay. Let yourself rest. Let your children heal. Before Lydia could respond, heavy footsteps sounded in the hall. Frank Garrett appeared in the doorway, his weathered face grave. "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Hartwell, but Cole's asking for you. Doc says he shouldn't be talking, but he's being stubborn about it." Lydia followed Frank down the hall to a large bedroom where Cole lay propped against a mountain of pillows. His torso was wrapped in clean bandages, his face pale but alert. Doc Morrison, a white-haired man with gentle hands, was packing up his medical bag. 10 minutes, the doctor said sternly. Then he needs to rest. He's lost too much blood and those burns are serious. Another few inches and that beam would have killed him. Cole waved him off impatiently. "I'm fine. I've survived worse." "You've survived worse by sheer stubbornness and blind luck. Don't push it." Morrison nodded to Lydia. "Make sure he doesn't get excited. No arguments, no stress. Just talk." Then he was gone, leaving Lydia alone with Cole in the intimate quiet of the bedroom. She moved to a chair beside the bed, acutely aware of the impropriety, a widow alone with a man in his bedroom. But after everything they'd been through, propriety seemed absurd. "The children?" Cole asked immediately. "Sleeping, safe, unharmed, thank God." The relief on his face was profound. "Good. That's good." He shifted carefully, wincing. "Frank told me about the homestead. I'm sorry, Lydia. You lost everything because of me." "We lost everything because Blackthorn is a monster, and his men are murderers. That's not on you. It's absolutely on me. If I hadn't been there, then you'd be dead, and 14 families would lose their homes. I made my choice, Cole. I'd make it again." She met his eyes steadily. "But I need to know what happens now. Blackthorn won't stop. He'll come after you here. Won't he?" "He'll try. But the double M is defensible, and I've got 30 hands who know how to fight. We're better prepared than you were." He reached out, his hand hovering near hers on the bed cover. "I won't let anything happen to your family. I swear it." "You can't promise that. You nearly died tonight." "I know, but I didn't die thanks to your son. Jonas saved my life by giving me the time to move. That boy has more courage than men twice his age." Cole's expression turned serious. "Which brings me to what I wanted to discuss. I have a proposal." Lydia's heart stuttered. Surely he didn't mean, no, that was impossible. They barely knew each other. She was reading too much into the word. "What kind of proposal?" "Stay here. You and the children, not as guests or charity cases, but as part of the ranch. There's a foreman's cottage that's been empty since Frank moved to the bunkhouse. It's small but solid. 3 rooms, good roof. You could live there, work here. Jonah's old enough to learn ranching if he wants. Grace could go to school in town. I pay for a teacher to come out twice a week for the hands' children. And you," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "you could help Maria run the house, keep the books, whatever suits your skills." It was too much, too generous, too close to the dreams Thomas had promised and never delivered. "Cole, I can't." "You can. You need a home, and I need people I can trust." "After tonight, there's no question about your loyalty or courage. You're exactly the kind of people I want on the double M." "People will talk. A widow living on a single man's ranch." "Let them talk. This is Montana territory, not Philadelphia. People care more about survival and competence than gossip." He finally let his hand rest on hers, warm and solid. "Please, Lydia, at least think about it. Stay through the winter. Give yourself time to heal and decide what you want. If you hate it, if you feel like you're imposing, you can leave in the spring, but give it a chance." The reasonable part of her brain screamed warnings about dependence, about complicated feelings, about the danger of getting too comfortable in someone else's world. But the exhausted, desperate part of her brain, the part that was so tired of fighting alone, wanted to say yes immediately. "I need to talk to my children. This affects them too." "Of course. Take all the time you need." But before she could stand, Cole's grip on her hand tightened. "Lydia, there's something else. Something I need to say while I still have the courage. Her breath caught. Cole, just listen, please. He took a breath, wincing at the pain it caused. I've been alone since Elizabeth died. 3 years of going through the motions, running the ranch because it needed running, but not really living, just existing. And then your children found me dying in the snow, and you saved my life without hesitation, without knowing who I was or what trouble I'd bring. You gave me everything when you had nothing to give. Anyone would have. No, they wouldn't have. You're extraordinary, Lydia. Your courage, your strength, the way you protect your children. You're everything Elizabeth would have admired. Everything I admire. His voice dropped lower. I'm not asking you to replace her. No one could. But maybe in time we could build something new, something that honors both our past while looking toward the future. Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. You're talking about marriage. Eventually, if you wanted. I'm not proposing now, that would be ridiculous. We barely know each other. But I'm saying that's where my heart is heading, if you're open to the possibility. He searched her face. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But we're not children, Lydia. We're adults who've both suffered loss and come out the other side. We know how precious life is, how quickly it can end, and I don't want to waste whatever time we have pretending I don't feel something for you. The honesty in his words struck her like a physical blow. No games, no careful courtship, just raw truth laid bare. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just think about it. Stay. Let us get to know each other properly. Let me prove I can be a good husband to you and a good father to your children. And if you decide I'm not what you want, I'll help you set up somewhere else. No hard feelings. But give us a chance. Before Lydia could formulate a response, footsteps thundered in the hallway. Jonah burst through the door, his face wild with panic. Mama, Grace is gone! Lydia was on her feet instantly. What do you mean, gone? I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I searched the whole upper floor. She's not here. Cole tried to sit up, failed, cursed viciously. Check the grounds, Frank! The foreman appeared immediately, and within minutes the entire ranch was mobilized. Men spread out with lanterns, searching every building, every corner. Lydia ran through the house, calling Grace's name, her voice growing more desperate with each unanswered cry. Where could she have gone? The child had been exhausted, traumatized. Why would she leave? Unless she hadn't left voluntarily. The thought hit Lydia like a fist to the gut. Blackthorn's men. They could have circled back, could have found a way into the house while everyone was focused on Cole's injuries. They could have taken Grace as leverage. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Mrs. Hartwell. One of the younger hands came running. Found tracks, small ones, child-sized, leading toward the south pasture. They followed the tracks through the snow, Lydia running despite the hampering dress, her heart in her throat. The tracks led to the horse barn, and inside they found Grace sitting in a stall with a beautiful Palomino mare, crying quietly. Grace! Lydia fell to her knees beside her daughter. Sweetheart, what are you doing out here? You scared us half to death. I'm sorry, Mama. Grace's voice was small and broken. I woke up and I remembered. About Papa's ring. What? Papa's ring. The one Grandma gave him when they got married. You always wore it on a chain around your neck. I remembered it was in the cabin and we didn't get it, and now it's gone forever, and you love that ring, and I'm so sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry. Comprehension dawned. In the chaos of the fire and the flight to the Double M, Lydia had completely forgotten about Thomas's ring. She'd kept it with her always, a tangible connection to the man she'd loved. And now it was ash, like everything else. Oh, sweetheart. Lydia pulled Grace into a fierce hug. That ring doesn't matter. You matter. Jonah matters. Everything else is just things. But you loved it. You loved Papa. I did love Papa. I still do. But that love lives in my heart, not in a ring. And Papa would be so angry if he thought you were risking yourself over a piece of metal. She pulled back, cupping Grace's tear-stained face. You are more precious to me than all the rings in the world. Do you understand? Grace nodded, still crying. Jonah had appeared in the barn doorway, relief written across his face. He moved to join them, and for a long moment the three of them held each other, a family that had lost everything but refused to be broken. I miss Papa, Grace whispered. I miss our house. I miss everything being normal. I know, baby. I miss it too. Lydia kissed her daughter's forehead. But we're going to be okay. We're survivors, remember? We're Hartwells, and Hartwells don't give up. Are we still Hartwells? Jonah's question was quiet, but it carried weight. Our house is gone. Our land is gone. What are we now? It was the question Lydia had been avoiding, the one she'd been too afraid to examine. What were they now? Refugees, charity cases, homeless wanderers dependent on a stranger's kindness? Or something else entirely? Something new? Come on, she said, helping Grace to her feet. Let's go back to the house. It's freezing out here. They walked back through the pre-dawn darkness, the ranch slowly coming awake around them. In the east, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a fresh start. Back at the house, Maria had breakfast ready, pancakes and bacon, eggs and fresh bread. The hands ate in shifts, fueling up for the day's work. Lydia sat with her children, watching them eat with better appetites than they'd shown in months, and felt the weight of Cole's question settling over her. Stay. Build something new. Let yourself be part of something larger. Could she do it? Could she let go of Thomas's dream and embrace a different future? After breakfast, she left the children with Maria and returned to Cole's room. He was sitting up now, though the effort clearly cost him. His eyes found hers immediately. She's all right? She's all right, just upset about losing some of our things in the fire. Lydia settled into the chair, her hands folded in her lap. Cole, about what you said before, about staying, about everything. You don't have to answer now. I know, but I need you to understand something first. She took a breath. I loved my husband. Thomas was a good man who had big dreams and the courage to chase them. He brought me west because he believed we could build something beautiful out here, and I loved him for that belief. When he died, I tried to keep his dream alive because I thought I owed him that. I thought if I could just make the homestead work, it would give his death meaning. But it was killing you. It was. Slowly, inch by inch, and I couldn't admit it because admitting it felt like betraying him. She met Cole's eyes. Last night when the cabin burned, I felt terrible, but I also felt relieved, like I'd been carrying a burden I could finally put down. That's not betrayal, Lydia. That's acceptance. Maybe. But it means I'm ready to move forward instead of clinging to the past. And I need you to know that before we talk about the future. She paused. I also need you to know that whatever I decide, it won't be out of desperation. I'm not looking for a man to rescue me. If I stay, if I eventually say yes to what you're suggesting, it will be because I choose it, because I want it, not because I need it. Pride sparked in Cole's eyes. I wouldn't want it any other way. Good. Then here's what I propose. She leaned forward, her voice steady. We stay through the winter, like you suggested. We work, contribute, earn our keep. We get to know each other properly, without the pressure of life or death situations. And in the spring, we'll talk about what comes next. If there's something real between us, we'll know by then. If there's not, we'll part as friends and you'll help me find a fresh start somewhere else. Does that sound reasonable? More than reasonable. It sounds perfect. There's one more thing. She hesitated, then pushed forward. My children. If this ever becomes more than a working arrangement, if we ever talk seriously about marriage, I need to know you understand what you'd be taking on. They're not just foo shu pin that come with me. They're whole people with opinions and feelings. Jonah's almost a man. He'll need guidance and respect, not a father figure trying to replace Thomas. And Grace is sensitive and imaginative and still processing her grief. They're not easy. No child who's been through what they've been through would be easy. But Lydia, I've seen your children. I've watched Jonah stand up to armed men and Grace find courage when everything was terrifying. They're extraordinary because you made them that way. I'm not interested in replacing their father. I'm interested in being someone they can count on, someone who'll stand with them, protect them, help them grow into the people they're meant to be. The sincerity in his voice made Lydia's eyes sting. You really mean that? Every word. I told you before, you saved my life. But your children are the ones who found me, who dragged me back from death. I owe them everything. And even if you and I never become more than friends, I'll always consider them family. Something in Lydia's chest cracked open, not breaking, but blooming. The tight defensive posture she'd held for 2 years loosened just a fraction. Then I think we have an agreement. Cole's smile was brilliant despite his exhaustion. Excellent. Now, there's just one more detail to work out. What's that? At some point, probably soon, Grace and Jonah are going to need to understand that I have intentions toward their mother. We should tell them together, make sure they're comfortable with the arrangement. You want to ask their permission? I want to include them in the conversation. They've been through too much uncertainty. They deserve to know what might happen and have a say in it. Lydia nodded slowly. It was the right approach, the respectful one. But it also meant making this real, concrete, something her children would have opinions about. Tomorrow, she decided, let's give everyone a day to rest and recover. Then we'll sit down as a family and discuss it. As a family. Cole tested the words, liked them. That sounds right. Before either could say more, a commotion erupted outside, horses shouting, the sound of many men arriving. Frank Garrett appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Boss, we've got company. Sheriff Hale, 5 deputies, and Silas Blackthorne himself. They're demanding to see you. Cole's expression hardened. Help me up. You're in no condition. I said help me up. Blackthorne doesn't get to see me weak. Between Frank and Lydia, they got Cole into a shirt and helped him downstairs. By the time they reached the front porch, Lydia could see the assembled group, hard-faced men on horseback, led by an older man with silver hair and the kind of cruel, calculating eyes that made her skin crawl. Silas Blackthorne. Maddox! His voice carried across the yard. You're alive. Color me surprised. No thanks to you. Cole leaned heavily on the porch rail, but his voice was strong. You tried to murder me, Blackthorne. Tried to steal my land. That's going to cost you. Murder? Theft? Those are serious accusations. You have proof? I have witnesses. I have men who will testify your riders ambushed me, shot me, and left me for dead. And I have the deed papers you wanted so badly, still in my possession, still valid. The double M is mine. It will always be mine. Blackthorne's expression didn't change, but his eyes went cold. I'm prepared to make a generous offer, 3 times what your land is worth. Take it and leave the territory. Otherwise, things are going to get very unpleasant. They're already unpleasant. You burned down a widow's homestead and tried to kill her and her children. That crosses a line even in Montana territory. For the first time, Blackthorne's gaze shifted to Lydia standing beside Cole. That was an unfortunate accident. My men were pursuing a fugitive. Things got out of hand. An accident. Lydia's voice cut through the cold morning air like a blade. You burned my home to the ground. You shot at my children. That wasn't an accident. That was attempted murder. I don't know what Maddox has told you, but he didn't have to tell me anything. I was there. I saw your men surround us. I heard them shouting for surrender. I watched my children nearly die because you wanted some pieces of paper. Sheriff Hale, a lean man in his 50s with a star pinned to his coat, shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Hartwell, is what you're saying true? You witnessed Blackthorne's men attacking your homestead. I witnessed armed men burning my home and shooting at us. Cole identified them as Blackthorne's employees. I have no reason to doubt him. The sheriff turned to Blackthorne. Silas, we talked about this. I told you to leave Maddox alone. Let the courts sort out the land disputes. I've done nothing wrong. If my men were involved in a situation at this woman's homestead, they were acting without my knowledge or consent. That's a damn lie, Frank Garrett spoke up. We have 2 bodies in the barn. Men we killed defending ourselves last night. Both of them worked for Blackthorne. We can prove it. The sheriff's face went carefully blank. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation. Cole's voice was steel. Blackthorne has been terrorizing homesteaders and small ranchers for years, using intimidation, violence, arson. Everyone knows it, but no one will testify because they're afraid. Well, I'm not afraid, and neither is Mrs. Hartwell. We're pressing charges. On what evidence? Physical evidence from the attack, witness testimony, the bodies of Blackthorne's men who died trying to kill us. Cole straightened despite the pain it caused. Sheriff, you can investigate this properly, or I can take this to the territorial governor. Your choice. The silence that followed was heavy with threat. Finally, Blackthorn laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. You're making a mistake, Maddox. Both of you. I own half the businesses in this territory. I have friends in Helena, in Washington. You really think you can fight me? I think I can try. And I think there are a lot of people tired of being pushed around by bullies. This ends now, Blackthorn, one way or another. The older man's expression turned murderous. We'll see about that. He wheeled his horse, barking orders to his men. They rode off in a cloud of snow and anger, leaving only Sheriff Hale and his deputies behind. That was foolish, Hale said quietly. Blackthorn doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. Neither do I. Cole swayed, and Lydia immediately moved to support him. Sheriff, are you going to investigate or not? I'll look into it. But Mrs. Hartwell, Mr. Maddox, be careful, very careful. Blackthorn has killed men for less than what you just did. After the sheriff left, Frank and the hands helped Cole back inside. His face was gray with exhaustion and pain, and Lydia could see the bandages seeping blood where his wounds had reopened. You should be in bed, she scolded. You probably just added a week to your recovery time. Worth it. Did you see his face? We rattled him. We also made him very, very angry. Good. Let him be angry. At least now everyone knows where we stand. Back in Cole's room, Doc Morrison appeared to redress the wounds, muttering dire warnings about patients who refused to rest. Lydia waited in the hall with her children, who'd witnessed the entire confrontation from an upstairs window. Mama, Jonah said quietly, Mr. Blackthorn looked at us like he wanted us dead. I know. Are we safe here? It was a child's question, but it deserved an honest answer. I don't know, sweetheart, but we're safer here than we would be anywhere else, and we're not alone anymore. We have Cole and Frank and all the double M hands. We have allies now. That counts for something. Grace tugged on Lydia's dress. Mama, do you like Mr. Maddox? The question caught her off guard. What makes you ask that? The way you look at him, the way he looks at you. Like Papa used to look at you before. She trailed off, not finishing the thought. Lydia knelt down to her daughter's level. Mr. Maddox is a good man who's helping us when we need it most. Yes, I like him. But anything beyond that? We're taking things slowly, very slowly, and nothing will happen without you and Jonah being part of the conversation. This family makes decisions together. Understood? Both children nodded. But Lydia saw something in Jonah's expression, not disapproval exactly, but caution. Wariness. Jonah, what is it? The boy hesitated, then said, He's not Papa. He seems nice, but he's not Papa. And I don't want you to forget Papa. The words struck deep. Lydia pulled both children into a hug, holding them tight. I could never forget your father. Never. He was my first love, the man who gave me you two. He'll always be part of our family. But sweetheart, Papa's gone, and we have to keep living. That doesn't mean replacing him or forgetting him. It means honoring him by building the kind of life he would have wanted for us. A safe, happy life where we're cared for and protected. Is that what Mr. Maddox offers? Maybe. I don't know yet. That's what we're going to figure out. She pulled back, meeting Jonah's eyes. But I promise you this. I won't make any big decisions without talking to you first. Your opinion matters. Your feelings matter. You're not just children I drag along. You're part of this decision. Deal? Deal, Jonah agreed, still cautious but less resistant. Grace simply nodded and tucked herself against Lydia's side. I just want us to be safe, Mama, and not hungry, and not cold all the time. We will be, baby, starting right now. That evening, as the sun set over the Sweetwater Valley, Lydia stood at the window of their borrowed bedroom and watched the ranch come alive with lamplight. Hands returning from their work, smoke rising from the cookhouse, the sounds of men laughing and horses settling in for the night. A community, functioning and alive. Behind her, Grace and Jonah were already in bed, finally relaxing enough to sleep deeply. They'd eaten 3 full meals today. They were warm and clean and safe. For the first time in 2 years, they weren't living on the edge of disaster. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Maria carrying a small wooden box. "Cole asked me to give you this," the older woman said. "He said you'd know what it meant." Lydia opened the box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a simple gold ring on a delicate chain. Not Thomas's ring, that was gone forever, but a new one, shining and hopeful in the lamplight. A note accompanied it, written in Cole's strong hand. Not a proposal, just a promise that you'll never have to face the cold alone again. Wear it or don't. The promise stands either way. Lydia's vision blurred with tears. She lifted the chain, let the ring catch the light, and felt something in her heart shift and settle. This wasn't about replacing Thomas or forgetting the past. It was about accepting that life went on, that hearts could heal, that hope could bloom even in the coldest winter. She clasped the chain around her neck, feeling the ring rest warm against her skin. Tomorrow they would face whatever came next, Blackthorn's revenge, the uncertain future, all the complications of building something new from the ashes of the old. But tonight, for this moment, Lydia Hartwell allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in 2 long years, the possibility of joy. And that, she thought, was worth any risk. Spring came to the Sweetwater Valley like a promise kept. The snow melted first from the south-facing slopes, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Ice broke on the creek with sounds like distant thunder, and the cottonwoods began to bud. After the brutal winter, the warmth felt like a gift, like the land itself was offering forgiveness for all the hardship it had demanded. Lydia stood on the porch of the foreman's cottage, watching the sunrise paint the valley in shades of gold and pink. Behind her, she could hear Grace singing softly as she set the table for breakfast, and Jonah's heavier footsteps as he returned from the barn where he'd been helping with the morning feeding. 4 months they'd been here now, and the cottage had become home in ways she hadn't expected. The ring Cole had given her still rested against her heart, though she'd told no one but Maria what it meant. They'd settled into an easy routine over the winter, worked during the day, shared meals in the main house several times a week, quiet conversations by the fire when the children were asleep. Getting to know each other slowly, carefully, like 2 people who'd both been burned and were wary of the flames. Cole had recovered fully, though he still bore scars from the bullet wound and the burns. The physical marks had faded faster than the emotional ones. He still woke some nights calling out warnings about ambushes, still checked every window before settling down to sleep. Lydia understood. She did the same thing, her body remembering the terror of that night, even when her mind tried to move forward. But they were moving forward, together, though neither had spoken the word aloud yet. "Mama!" Grace burst through the door, her face alight with excitement. "Mr. Cole says the teacher's coming today, and there's 3 other children my age. Can I wear my blue dress?" "The one Maria made you?" "Of course." Lydia smoothed her daughter's dark hair, marveling at the change in her. Grace had gained weight, her cheeks full and healthy, her eyes bright with curiosity instead of hunger. She laughed more, played more, was allowed to be a child again. Jonah had changed too, though in different ways. At 13 now, he'd grown 3 inches and put on muscle from ranch work. Cole had taken him under his wing, teaching him to ride, to rope, to understand cattle and horses, and the rhythms of ranch life. The boy had blossomed under the attention, his natural leadership abilities emerging as he worked alongside the hands. But there was still a wariness in him when it came to Cole and Lydia's growing closeness, a protective instinct that she both understood and worried about. "Jonah," she called, "breakfast is ready." Her son appeared, hay still stuck to his shirt, his face ruddy from the morning cold. "Frank says I can help with the spring roundup, if it's all right with you. That's 3 weeks in the high pastures. You'd be gone almost a month." "I know. But Mama, I'm not a kid anymore. I can handle it, and Cole will be there. He'll look out for me." There it was again. Cole, not Mr. Maddox. The familiarity had crept in gradually over the winter, so slowly that Lydia hadn't noticed until it was already established. Her son was attaching himself to this man, seeing him as a mentor, maybe more, which meant when the conversation finally came, the one they'd all been dancing around, it would matter even more. "We'll discuss it," she said, which was mother speak for probably yes. "Eat your breakfast before it gets cold." They ate together, the 3 of them, in a kitchen that smelled of coffee and bacon and fresh bread. Simple things, but precious. Lydia had learned to appreciate simple things over the winter. Warm beds, full bellies, the absence of fear. She'd learned to let go of the guilt that came with accepting help, with allowing someone else to share the burden of survival. After breakfast, Jonah headed back to the barns, and Grace went to prepare for the teacher's arrival. Lydia was washing dishes when she heard the horses. She recognized the sound immediately. Too many riders, moving too fast. Her body tensed, muscle memory from that terrible night flooding back. She dried her hands and stepped outside, one hand automatically going to the rifle beside the door. But these weren't Blackthorn's men. They were double M hands, a dozen of them, led by Frank Garrett, and they were escorting someone, a man in a suit, riding awkwardly, like someone unused to horses. Cole emerged from the main house, moving with the careful precision of someone whose injuries still twinged in cold weather. He saw Lydia's defensive posture and raised a hand in reassurance. "It's all right. This is Marshal Hendricks from Helena. He's been investigating Blackthorn." The marshal dismounted, brushing trail dust from his coat. He was younger than Lydia expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'd like to speak with you about the night of the attack. Your testimony could be crucial to our case." Over the next hour, Lydia recounted everything: the ambush, the fire, the gunfight, watching Blackthorn's men try to burn them out. The marshal took notes, asked pointed questions, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. "And you can positively identify the bodies as Blackthorn's employees?" "Several of the ranch hands can," Cole interjected. They recognized two of the dead men, Jack Reese and Tom Carlson. Both were on Blackthorn's payroll. "Reese is dead?" The marshal looked genuinely surprised. "I didn't know that." "Took a bullet in the firefight. He's buried on the property if you need to exhume the body for confirmation." Hendricks nodded slowly. "That changes things. Reese was wanted in 3 territories for murder. If we can prove he was working for Blackthorn, it strengthens the case considerably." "What case?" Lydia asked. "What exactly are you investigating?" "Everything. Land fraud, intimidation, arson, murder. We've been building a case against Silas Blackthorn for 2 years, but we needed witnesses willing to testify, and most people were too afraid. Your willingness to come forward, Mrs. Hartwell, yours and Mr. Maddox's, has given us the leverage we needed." "Other people are talking?" 14 families from the double M shares, 3 widows whose husbands died under suspicious circumstances after refusing to sell their land, 2 town merchants who were threatened. Once word got out that someone was finally standing up to Blackthorn, others found their courage. The marshal's expression was satisfied. "We're going to trial in 3 weeks, and I believe we're going to win." The words hung at the spring air like music. Justice. Real justice, not just frontier vengeance or vigilante action, but legal accountability. The thing Thomas had believed in when he'd brought them west, the promise that law would eventually triumph over lawlessness. "You'll both need to testify," Hendricks continued. "Be prepared for Blackthorn's lawyers to attack your credibility. They'll bring up your relationship, Mrs. Hartwell, the fact that you're living on Mr. Maddox's property. They'll try to paint you as his paramour, suggesting your testimony is biased." Lydia felt heat rise in her face. "My testimony is the truth." "I know that, but Blackthorn will use any weapon he can find. I'm just warning you, it won't be pleasant." After the marshal left, Cole walked Lydia back to the cottage. They moved in silence for a while, the enormity of what was coming settling over them both. "He's right," Cole said finally. "They'll come after you, after your reputation, after the children. Blackthorn will try to destroy you rather than let you testify." "Let him try. I've survived worse." "Have you?" He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Lydia, this is different than winter starvation or a homestead fire. This is deliberate, calculated destruction of your character. They'll call you a whore in open court. They'll suggest you sold yourself for security, that you'd say anything to protect your meal ticket. Can you handle that?" The blunt words stung, but Lydia understood he wasn't being cruel. He was being realistic. "Can you?" she countered. "They'll call you a man who takes advantage of desperate widows, who uses his wealth and position to coerce women into his bed. That'll damage your reputation just as much." "I don't care about my reputation. I care about you, about Grace and Jonah, about what this will do to them." Then maybe it's time we stopped worrying about what people think and started being honest about what we are. The words were out before she could stop them, bold and risky. Cole's eyes widened slightly. And what are we, Lydia? I don't know. That's what we've been trying to figure out all winter, isn't it? Whether this thing between us is real or just convenience, whether we're building something or just hiding from loneliness. She took a breath. I think it's time we found out. How? We talk to the children, tonight. We tell them the truth, that we care about each other, that we're considering a future together, that we want their blessing before we move forward. She met his eyes steadily. And then we let the chips fall, where they may. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then, and if they say no? If Jonah especially isn't ready? Then we wait. We keep going as we are until he is ready. But Cole, we can't live in limbo forever. At some point we have to know if this is going somewhere or if we're just fooling ourselves. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. I already know where this is going, at least where I want it to go. I'm in love with you, Lydia. Have been for months. I'm just terrified of pushing too hard, of asking too much. The confession stole her breath. She'd suspected, hoped, but hearing the words out loud was different, real, undeniable. I'm in love with you too, she whispered, and that terrifies me, because I didn't think I could love anyone again after Thomas. I thought that part of me was dead, but you brought it back to life, and now I don't know what to do with these feelings. We figure it out together. We talk to the children. We face whatever comes next side by side. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. Marry me, Lydia, not because you need rescuing or because it's convenient, but because we love each other and life's too short to waste time pretending we don't. Yes. The word came easily, naturally. Yes, but we do this right. We talk to Grace and Jonah first. We make sure they're truly comfortable with this. And we wait until after the trial. I won't give Blackthorn the satisfaction of using our happiness as ammunition. After the trial then, but Lydia, his voice was fierce. This is a promise. You're mine and I'm yours, whether we speak vows tomorrow or 6 months from now. That's not changing. I know. She kissed him softly, a brief touch of lips that held more promise than passion. I know. That evening, after dinner, they gathered in the main house, Lydia and her children, Cole and Maria, as witness and supporter. Grace sat close to her mother, sensing something important was coming. Jonah perched on the edge of his chair, his young face guarded. There's something we need to discuss, Lydia began. Something that affects all of us. You're getting married. Jonah's words were flat, factual. You and Cole. The directness startled her. How did you... I'm not blind, Mama. I've seen how you look at each other, how he touches your hand at dinner, how you smile more when he's around. The boy's jaw tightened. I knew it was coming. And how do you feel about it? Does it matter? You've already decided. It matters more than anything. Cole leaned forward, his voice earnest. Jonah, I'm not trying to replace your father. No one could do that. Thomas Hartwell was a good man who loved your family and gave his life trying to build something for you. I respect that. I honor that. But you want to marry Mama anyway. I do. Because I love her. Because I love you and Grace too. Because I think we could build something good together, not replacing what was, but creating something new that honors the past while looking toward the future. Jonah was silent, his hands clenched in his lap. Grace watched him anxiously, clearly torn between her own feelings and loyalty to her brother. Tell me what you're thinking, Lydia urged gently. Please, sweetheart, we need to understand. I'm thinking, Jonah's voice cracked. I'm thinking that if you marry Cole, it means Papa is really gone. Not just dead, but forgotten, replaced, like he never mattered. The pain in those words broke Lydia's heart. She knelt in front of her son, taking his clenched hands in hers. Oh, Jonah, Papa will never be forgotten. Never. He's in every memory we have, every lesson he taught us, every moment we spent together as a family. That doesn't disappear just because we move forward. But you're choosing Cole over Papa. No, I'm choosing life over death. I'm choosing to let my heart heal and grow instead of staying frozen in grief. That's not betrayal, sweetheart. That's what Papa would have wanted for us. How do you know? How can you be sure? It was Grace who answered, her small voice cutting through the tension. Because Papa loved us. And people who love you want you to be happy, even when they're gone. The simple wisdom of it seemed to reach Jonah where adult logic couldn't. His rigid posture softened slightly. I loved my wife, Cole said quietly. Elizabeth. She died 3 years ago, and I thought I'd never love anyone again. I thought being alone was somehow honoring her memory, but I was wrong. Love doesn't run out, Jonah. The more you give, the more you have. Loving your mother doesn't mean I loved Elizabeth any less, and your mother loving me doesn't mean she loves your father any less. We're just making room in our hearts for more love. But what if... Jonah struggled with the words. What if I forget him? What if Grace does? We're already forgetting what his voice sounded like. What if adding you to our family makes us forget him completely? Then we make sure that never happens, Lydia said firmly. We tell stories about Papa. We remember the good times and the hard times. We keep his memory alive together, all of us. Cole, me, you, Grace. We honor Thomas Hartwell by living the kind of life he dreamed of for us. A life full of love and safety and possibility. She pulled the ring from beneath her dress. Not the one Cole had given her, but a different one, small and delicate, that she'd worn since the day she'd married Thomas. This was your grandmother's ring. Papa gave it to me when he proposed. I've worn it every day since, even after he died. I'm not taking it off, Jonah. I'll wear it until I die right alongside whatever ring Cole gives me, because both loves are real, both matter, and there's room in my heart for both. Tears streamed down Jonah's face now, the careful walls he'd built crumbling. I just miss him so much. I know, baby. So do I. Lydia pulled him into a fierce hug, feeling his thin shoulders shake with sobs. And it's okay to miss him while also being happy. It's okay to love Cole while still loving Papa. We're allowed to have both. Grace joined the embrace, her arms around both of them. And after a moment, Cole's larger hands rested on their shoulders. Not intruding, just present, supporting, offering strength without demanding anything in return. When Jonah finally pulled back, his face was blotchy and wet, but something had shifted in his expression. The desperate fear had eased into something more like acceptance. If we do this, he said carefully, if you marry Cole, can I keep Papa's name? Can we still be Hartwells? Of course, Cole said immediately. I wouldn't ask you to give that up. You could be Jonah Thomas Hartwell Maddox if you wanted, or just Hartwell, whatever feels right to you. And you won't try to make me call you Pa or anything? Not unless you want to. You can call me Cole or Mr. Maddox or hey you. I'll answer to anything as long as you know I'm here for you, always. Jonah studied Cole's face for a long moment, seeming to search for dishonesty or hidden agendas. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. Okay, I'm not saying I'm happy about it, but I'm not saying no either. I need time to get used to the idea. That's all we're asking, Lydia assured him. Time and honesty. If you're struggling, you tell us. If something doesn't feel right, you speak up. This family makes decisions together. What about me? Grace piped up. Don't I get a say? Of course you do, sweetheart. How do you feel about this? Grace was quiet for a moment, her young face serious. Then she surprised everyone by going directly to Cole and holding out her hand, palm up. Papa's ring. The one that burned in the fire. Mama cried about it. Cole looked confused. Grace, I don't have... Not Papa's actual ring, but a ring that could be like it. Something that says Mama and Papa belong together and always will. Can you get that? Before you marry her? Understanding dawned in Cole's eyes. You want me to give your mother a ring that honors Thomas? Yes, because if you love Mama, you have to love all of her, including the part that still loves Papa. That's how it works. The childish wisdom of it left everyone momentarily speechless. Then Cole knelt down to Grace's level, his face solemn. You're absolutely right, and I promise you, when I ask your mother to marry me properly, with a ring and everything, I'll make sure Thomas Hartwell is honored too, because he's part of your family, which means he's part of mine now. Deal? Grace threw her arms around his neck. Deal. And Cole, I think you'll be a good papa. Not the same as Papa Thomas, but good. Over her head, Cole's eyes met Lydia's, bright with unshed tears. Maria was crying openly, not even trying to hide it. And Jonah, still wary but no longer hostile, managed a small smile. It wasn't perfect. There would be hard days ahead, moments of grief and doubt, times when they all missed Thomas so much it hurt to breathe. But this was real. This was honest. This was a family learning to heal together. So, Lydia said, her voice thick with emotion, after the trial, when everything's settled, we'll talk about wedding plans. After the trial, Cole agreed. But Lydia, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Your homestead claim. What about it? It's still valid. You proved habitation and you have witnesses to the attack that destroyed your improvements. The land office will rule in your favor. That ground is legally yours. Lydia hadn't thought about the homestead in weeks. In her mind, it was gone, burned away along with everything else from her old life. What good is land I can't work? We work it. Together. We rebuild the cabin, bigger this time, better. We run cattle on your acres and mine, combine the operations, create something that belongs to all of us. Cole's voice was earnest. I don't want you to give up what Thomas built, Lydia. I want to help you finish it. The generosity of the offer staggered her. He wasn't asking her to give up her independence or Thomas's legacy. He was offering to weave them together into something new and stronger. The Morning Glory Ranch, Grace said suddenly. That's what we should call it, because Mama's name is Lydia, and that means morning glory, and because morning is when everything starts fresh. Morning Glory Ranch, Jonah tested the words. I like it. Papa would have liked it too. So it was decided. After the trial, after they'd faced down Blackthorn and won their justice, they would marry. They would rebuild. They would combine the Double M and the Hartwell homestead into something that honored both pasts while embracing a shared future. The trial came 3 weeks later, held in Redemption's largest building, the Methodist Church, temporarily converted to a courthouse. Half the territory seemed to have shown up, packing the pews and spilling out into the yard. This was the trial everyone had been waiting for, the showdown between Silas Blackthorn and the people he'd terrorized for years. Lydia took the stand wearing her best dress, another of Elizabeth's, altered to fit, and the 2 rings she now wore on chains around her neck. She told her story simply and clearly, meeting Blackthorn's cold gaze without flinching. His lawyer tried to rattle her, suggested she'd manufactured the attack to win Cole's sympathy, insinuated she was an opportunistic widow who'd traded her body for security. Is it true, the lawyer asked snidely, that you've been living on Mr. Maddox's property, unchaperoned, for 4 months? I've been living in the foreman's cottage with my children, working to earn our keep and recovering from having my home burned down by your client's men. Lydia's voice was steel. And whatever relationship exists between Mr. Maddox and myself is none of your business and irrelevant to the fact that I watched Silas Blackthorn's employees try to murder my family. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge had to bang his gavel for silence. Cole testified next, laying out the ambush, the stolen papers, Blackthorn's systematic campaign of terror against small landowners. He was calm, factual, devastating. Other witnesses followed. The 14 families, the widows, the merchants. Hours of testimony painting a picture of corruption and violence that couldn't be denied. Blackthorn's defense was that his employees had acted without his knowledge, that he was a legitimate businessman being persecuted by jealous competitors. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bodies, the witnesses, the pattern of behavior stretching back years. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood with a piece of paper in his trembling hands. We find the defendant, Silas Blackthorn, guilty on all charges: conspiracy to commit murder, arson, land fraud, intimidation, guilty. The courtroom exploded. People cheered, cried, embraced. Lydia felt Cole's arm around her shoulders, felt her children pressing close, and let herself cry with relief. It was over. Finally, truly over. Blackthorn was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. His assets were seized to compensate his victims. The land he'd stolen was returned to its rightful owners. Justice, real and complete, was served. Walking out of the church into the spring sunshine, Lydia felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of fear and uncertainty had lifted, leaving room for joy to rush in. "Mama!" Grace tugged on her hand. "Can we get married now? Can we really become a family?" Lydia looked at Cole, saw the question and hope in his eyes. She thought about Thomas, about the love they'd shared and the dreams he'd died chasing. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that he would want this for them, would want her to be happy, would want his children to have a father who would cherish them. "Yes," she said, smiling through tears. "Yes, we can." They married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Double M. Maria decorated the house with wildflowers. Frank Garrett stood as Cole's best man. Grace and Jonah stood with their mother, solemn and proud in their new clothes. But before Cole placed the wedding band on Lydia's finger, he pulled out a second ring, a simple gold band engraved with forget-me-nots, Thomas's favorite flower. "For Thomas," he said quietly. "So he knows he's not forgotten. So he's part of this union too." Lydia could barely speak through her tears as she accepted both rings. She placed them on her left hand together, gold bands intertwined, two loves joined into one. Behind her, she heard Jonah's soft intake of breath, saw the acceptance and gratitude in his eyes. This was right. This was how it was meant to be. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the traveling preacher intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Cole's kiss was gentle, respectful, full of promise. When they pulled apart, Grace was crying happy tears, and even Jonah was smiling. The assembled ranch hands cheered, and someone started playing a fiddle. The celebration lasted into the night. They danced under the stars, ate Maria's amazing food, laughed until their sides hurt. At one point, Lydia found herself standing with her new husband on the porch, watching their combined families mingle and celebrate. "Happy?" Cole asked. "More than I ever thought I could be again." She leaned into his strength. "Thank you. For understanding about Thomas. For honoring him. He gave me you. He gave me those incredible children. How could I not honor him?" Cole's arm tightened around her waist. "Besides, I meant what I said. The more love you give, the more you have." Inside, Grace shrieked with laughter as Jonah spun her in a dance. The boy had grown so much over the past months, taller, stronger, more confident. He caught Lydia's eye and gave her a thumbs up, his smile genuine and unforced. "He's going to be all right," Cole observed. "They both are. You raised amazing children, Lydia Maddox." Lydia Maddox. The name still felt strange, but good, like putting on a new dress that fit perfectly. "We raised them," she corrected, "past tense and future tense, all of us together." They stayed there as the stars wheeled overhead and the music played on. Two people who'd found each other in the darkest winter and chosen to build a spring together. 1 year later, Lydia sat at the desk in the main house of the Morning Glory Ranch, the newly rebuilt homestead, expanded and improved, sitting on the land Thomas had claimed and she and Cole had made flourish. Through the window, she could see Jonah working with the hands, his easy competence with horses making everyone predict he'd be a fine rancher someday. Grace was in the yard with several other children, her laughter carrying on the wind. And in the cradle beside the desk, their daughter, Charlotte Elizabeth Maddox, named for both her grandmothers, slept peacefully, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. Lydia opened the leather journal Cole had given her, its pages still mostly empty, waiting to be filled with their family's story. She dipped her pen in ink and began to write. "Today marks 1 year since Cole and I married, and 18 months since the night everything changed. I want to record this for my children, all of them, so they understand where we came from and what it took to get here. We came through fire, literally and figuratively. We lost our home but found our family. We buried the past but carried its best parts forward. We learned that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. That you can honor those who are gone while embracing those who are here. That the heart has infinite capacity if you're brave enough to let it expand. Thomas, wherever you are, I hope you can see what we've built. I hope you know that your children are thriving, that the land you claimed is flourishing, that your dreams came true even if not in the way you imagined. You're here in every sunset they watch, every value they hold, every moment of courage they show. You're not forgotten. You never will be." Cole, My second love and second chance. I thank God every day for the storm that brought you to our door. You saved us, but we saved you too. We made each other whole again. Grace, Jonah, Charlotte, remember this. Remember that hard times don't last, but strong families do. Remember that it's okay to grieve and grow at the same time. Remember that love is never wasted, never lost, never wrong when it's real and true. We're the Maddox family now, but we carry the Hartwell name too. In our hearts and in Jonah's legal name, Jonah Thomas Hartwell Maddox, a bridge between past and future. This is our story. This is our triumph. We walked through the fire and came out forged into something stronger, something beautiful, something worth every trial it took to get here. The widow who saved a dying cowboy, the cowboy who gave a family hope, the children who learned that love can grow in the most unlikely soil. Together, we're building something that will last, something that honors where we came from while embracing where we're going. The Morning Glory Ranch, where every sunrise brings new possibility and every sunset brings grateful peace. This is home. This is family. This is love. And we made it together. Lydia set down her pen as Charlotte stirred and began to fuss. She lifted her daughter, marveling at the weight of her, the realness of her. This child who was proof that life went on, that joy could bloom even in the most barren soil. Cole appeared in the doorway, dusty from a day's work, his face lighting up at the sight of his wife and daughter. "How are my girls?" "Perfect. We're perfect." He crossed to kiss them both, one arm around Lydia's shoulders, one finger caught in Charlotte's tiny grip. Through the window, they could see Jonah teaching Grace to rope a fence post, both of them laughing at her wild attempts. "We did good," Cole said quietly. Thomas would be proud. He would be. Lydia leaned into her husband's strength, feeling Charlotte's heart beat against her chest, hearing her older children's laughter on the wind. We all did good. That night, as the Montana sky blazed with stars and the mountains stood eternal in the distance, the Maddox family gathered for dinner. They ate together, talked together, laughed together. And before the meal ended, Lydia raised her glass. "A toast," she said, "to family, past, present, and future. To Thomas Hartwell, who started this journey. To Cole Maddox, who helped us complete it. To Grace, Jonah, and Charlotte, who are the reason we fight and dream and hope. To everyone at this table and everyone watching over us. To survival, healing, and the courage to love again. To family," they echoed, glasses clinking. And as the last light faded from the western sky, as the lamps were lit and the fire crackled warm, as children settled into bed and adults found each other's hands in the darkness, Lydia Hartwell Maddox knew with absolute certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The storm had brought them together. Love had made them family. And nothing, not hardship, not loss, not all the trials of the frontier could tear apart what they'd built. They'd walked through fire and emerged as gold. And their story, hard-won and precious, was finally beautifully complete.